OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Yeah, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors. This is OTB AM brought to you by Gillette. I believe it is our first show of 2022, and if you are trying to get back on track from the Christmas period and all that, we will have some very good advice for you later on in the show about some January ambitions, some New Year resolutions and all of that. We've actually a packed show today. I'll get to that very shortly as I get my live doc up here. Very badly prepared, Rory O'Connor, this morning, but you did...
Introduce yourself first, Johnny.
I'm Johnny Ward, obviously, yeah. Badly prepared this morning because the computer went dead on me. I'm just getting the live doc up here. But you managed to salvage the coffee situation.
Just about, yeah. A stealthy mission to another floor to pick up the coffee to start the new year. I think it would have been a fairly lifeless show if yourself and myself hadn't had a bit of caffeine to start the new year and the new day. But
are you a coffee addict?
Probably a bit too much, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Is it one of your last ways for 2022 to drink less coffee?
No.
The other voices?
No, I think there's enough going on without setting ridiculous, ruining your life effectively. Like, I can't get through the day without at least 4 or 5 coffees, especially working from home all the time. You get cold, and I don't really like tea that much, so it's all about the coffee for me. It's
almost a psychological thing for me now. I just like to be working with a coffee beside me.
Yeah.
And it's like the amount of money I've spent in cafes, so I got in a new machine and it's changed my life.
Really?
Coffee's the way to go. Yeah. It's well worth paying for.
Takes you an age to put it all together, does it? Or is it quick and easy?
No, quick and easy, and first thing in the morning, and wouldn't be a bad thing to have a little double espresso late at night as well. After your meal. It's
not a great time for resolutions at the moment, though, is it? With everything that's going on, it hasn't been you don't want to be changing your life, upending your life when you can't go see anyone inside or anything like that.
What's your attitude to know? I feel like we're kind of near the end because with all the vaccinations and all that, and with the caseload versus the amount of people in ICU, I'm very encouraged by that. If nothing else, I know the hospital figures are quite high, but do you feel like we're near the end now?
No, it's not really. I think. I guess I watch it all through the prism of sport, and at the moment, 5,000 max in an Irish stadium, we're kind of back to where we were a little bit. I mean, the rugby schedule was completely wiped out at Christmas. We had one game over the whole of Christmas period. So that, from my kind of day-to-day point of view, even though I was off for a lot of it, that kind of shows me that we're a long way from being out of it. Even though life the pubs are closed at 8 o'clock every day in the restaurants, so that's really hard on them. So no, I don't really have. I hope so. I hope that this is the last time. But we've thought about so many times. I think the lesson we've all learned is not to get too ahead of ourselves. So that's why I think people doing dry January and stuff, they're taking on an awful lot. Have you
ever done dry January?
Once or twice, yeah. I managed to get to about the 29th or so and felt like I'd achieved my goals. So I haven't had a drink yet since Christmas, so maybe I'll give it a go this year. But I think it's a bit of too much of a commitment when there's so much else going on.
How's young Turlough keeping the kid suspiciously named after a Bowes legend? Although apparently your wife liked the name.
She did, yeah. No, absolutely good. Yeah, he had a good Christmas. Turlough, for those who don't, Johnny, you sometimes think it was just me and you together, but yeah.
Everyone watching here is a big League of Ireland fan. Obviously.
That's true. He had a good Christmas. Everyone, it was nice. Back to normal today. I think people are probably tuning in, going to work for the first time in 2 or 3 weeks, so it's pretty cold out there as well.
We live in amazing times because Dublin city centre is going to be completely transformed by the lack of people working in the city now, and that's, you can see that in a lot of the shops. A lot of the time it's quite dead in town, because there's so many people now working remotely, and you wonder how that'll go going forward.
Yeah, well, I lived in
office space as well, obviously.
Yeah, well, I live in town, so I've been here the whole way through. So when everything was really shut down, you wouldn't recognise the place. I was jogging up Grafton Street. I'd never realised Grafton Street was a hill before until I jogged from the bottom to the top, and things hopefully we'll never have to do again. But the whole place is shut down. So right now it feels reasonably busy. I think a lot of stuff hasn't really shut down. I think a lot of construction, a lot of offices are still kind of at least half going. So there's still a lot of traffic on the roads, but I hope it doesn't go back to that kind of really dead period. I suppose January is always a pretty quiet month, but it's pretty bleak when it gets that quiet.
It is. It was absolutely eerie last year in particular. Coming up on the show today, performance rankings 740. So we've Yeah, a few sports to get through there, mainly Premier League, but we'll talk rugby and the performance rankings as well. That's going to take up the bulk of the first part of the show. Shane Keegan is on, the regular football guru, who I really like Shane's tactical piece in the 42. I think we discussed this on Saturday and he got quite animated about the quality or otherwise of football punditry at the moment. Shane actually looks at things from a coaching perspective. Rory watched the Man United game last night. I didn't, although I kind of feel like I did, because it seemed like it was a bit of the same again from them, and Shane is going to go through that from a sort of tactical perspective. And I just love talking about Ronaldo and Man United. I think it is a problem for them. I don't know how he played last night, but I don't think he's helped in terms of other players, offensive players, and their performance for Man United. The papers at 8:30. A couple of interesting stories in the papers today. So normally we have OTB AM obviously on a Monday, and the paper is absolutely dominated by the weekend's sporting action. But today being a Tuesday, there are some interesting transfer stories and so on and so forth. Ronan O'Gara, this is when Rod will come into his own. I don't think Rod has been on since the Johan van Gran news, and obviously he has to talk about his own club's little disappointing results there a couple of days ago, and he'll have lots to talk about.
Yeah, well, he didn't have a great start to the new year, and he lost the cast and had Ihaya West, the out half, who's a very good player, but probably not the world's greatest goal kicker, missed a very, very kickable shot to win the game. And like O'Gara has absolved them and said we all make mistakes kind of thing after the game, but you got to think that as formerly one of the best out halves in the world, to see your team undone by what you were best at, while you can empathise with the player, it must be driving them absolutely mad, and it must be a terrible way to start the new year, because they played very well by all accounts away to Cast, and the top 14, it's like the Premier League, it's just a slog, it's week. And I think, that was a game they feel like they really should have won. So hopefully he's recovered his form for chat, or else it could be quite brief.
Yeah, well, also he did a very interesting column in the Examiner as well. Like a well thought out column about the three kind of batches within your squad, which was really, really intriguing. And I think a lot of coaches, like across sports, will kind of relate to what he's saying. So we'll get to him on that. At 9:10, off the couch with Jessie Barr. So essentially this week we're going to talk to people across the 4 days to kind of give those people who are trying to, do something in January a little bit of a boost. And I guess Jessie's probably going to talk from the perspective of maybe not going ahead of yourself, just like having some aspirations in terms of your New Year's resolutions that are realistic. But Jessie will hopefully kind of, I suppose, give us some positivity as well. She's obviously a former Olympian and current sport and performance psychologist for the Institute of Sport. And Jessie's going to be the first one we're going to hear from this week. That's a team we're going to have across the week. And I'm intrigued as well, because I think, I don't know, I actually got into cycling last year. I think there are a lot of things that people could get into that would really energise them and they'd enjoy that they just haven't done, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about, I was going to say it's all about picking one. I probably try and do too many things and kind of fall between two stools for some weeks on end. But I think having something in your life is definitely very important. You've gone into the cycling with the banding, Johnny. Like, you're putting on some serious miles. Not when you're not on crutches as you are currently laid up.
Yeah, I have to say, at the start of lockdown last year, it was very challenging because all my work was gone. And actually the only work I had at that time was coming in here on a Saturday. I'm not even sure if the racing were on at that time. It probably was, but actually the racing probably wasn't on because there was no racing. So coming in here, and me, Dan and JD would look back at old World Cups, and that was actually that kept us going, and that was your sole focus for the week.
Yeah.
So cycling was a product of that, I guess.
Yeah, and you can get out for hours on end. I love doing it. I don't do it as often as you do, unfortunately, but it's a great way to pass the time. But yeah, I think Jessie would be good in terms of finding that motivation. It's finding the time in your day, I think, is the main key. Certainly for me anyway. It's kind of carving out that hour that you need, or a couple of hours if you're going for a cycle or something like that. So it's it'll be interesting to see what kind of tips she has for us.
We'll have Ross Tierney on the show tomorrow morning. Brilliant. All going well. Obviously left for Bowes. So I suppose briefly your thoughts of the off-season stuff going across in the league, because it's been lively to say the least.
It's hard to keep track of it all, really, isn't it? I mean, Dundalk, we kind of expected Dundalk were basically, picked apart by all the other, as a carcass by all the other teams. And I remember hearing, I think people know I'm a Bowes fan, before the end of last season, that Bowes were kind of in for three of Dundalk's best players, and there was a good chance we get them. And one's gone to Scotland, the two others have stayed, as far as I know, Sloggett and Dan Cleary's gone to Scotland. Can't recall who the third one was, but it was. it's kind of been like, I think Drogheda have been the big losers. They seem to have lost all their players. They've been they're the carcass that have been picked by everyone. Bows have actually managed to hold on to a few and add a couple of really, really good players. So I'm actually feeling much better than I was a couple of months ago, or a couple of weeks ago after the cup final. But I think it's all kind of a bit like the Premier League. It's all kind of, it's all moving parts below the main player, and like I just don't see anyone being able to close that gap on Rovers. Maybe Derry, because Derry and they did their business early. But
it's funny you say that,
because tears in the Titanic, really, because Rovers are so strong, and they'll probably sign someone from a different league, over the course of the before the season starts, and that they haven't been weakened at all, really. Like, they brought in Jack Byrne. It's kind of hard to see how anyone's gonna kind of bridge that gap that's there, and they weren't even that impressive last season. So if they actually play well this year, they could blow it away.
I agree with pretty much all that. It's time for the performance rankings.
That wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Yeah, my computer just decided to do a reboot. Just turned it on at
Doing some updates.
7:28, and
it hasn't been on since before Christmas, Johnny.
No, because it actually hasn't. So the last person logged in here appears to have been me, but it decided that whatever the intervening time was, like 10 days or something. Even the computer needs to, New Year's resolutions and all that. The performance rankings today, though, the first one with Gillette of the season. No better place to start than Munster Rugby. Now, we will be talking to Ronan O'Gara in due course. Just before we get to Munster Rugby, are you worried about Six Nations at this stage in terms of, not that it'll go ahead necessarily, but crowds? Because it's the makings of an amazing Six Nations.
France has gone to 5,000 in stadiums now for the month of January, and Rog can probably fill us in on that. I think they're their last weekend of full crowds. Last weekend. Ireland's obviously 5,000 now up until the 31st of January, and Six Nations gets going on, I think, 5th or 6th of February. So I wouldn't be worried about going ahead. I think they'll move heaven and earth. Although if Omicron gets into one of the camps, you're goosed. As we've seen in Premier League. If the Premier League stops, this is serious, and because they'll do everything they can to get their schedule going. So many of their camps got shut down. So like, these bubbles are going to have to be super bubbles over the next couple of weeks. Although it will have hopefully dissipated a bit. Not that I'm an epidemiologist or anything like that, but I think they'll get the tournament going, and it's a very, very, as you say, very, very good tournament. And last year, some of the games were magnificent, despite the fact that they were in empty stadiums, and it felt awful being in an empty stadium. But once the action kicked in, the players didn't seem to be affected by it, so it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And 5,000 in the Aviva, if it's done right. I was there for the Bows games last summer. Actually, the atmosphere can be quite good with
5,000 compared to nobody is massive.
It's much better. Yeah. But it's still, you'd hope that by the end of January, the crowds will at least be half capacity. But from an Irish point of view and an Irish rugby point of view, I think those full it's not that I think those full stadiums are basically the money that drives the entire organisation from top to bottom across the board. And if they cannot have full stadiums for the 3 home games in the spring, it's going to be very damaging to the RFU coffers again. So it's a bit of a disaster timing wise for them. Like Munster, we're going to talk about, like, they've got Ulster at home this weekend, and then they have they're playing Wasps in 2 weeks' time, in what would be one of their big earners of the year as well. That's gone, down to 5,000, both down to 5,000. That's big earners gone. They lost Leinster on Stevens' day. That was a full house that was sold out. Leinster have Montpellier coming next weekend. That'll be 5,000. That's a big blow to them financially. Ulster are not affected by it because the rules are different up north. So I'm concerned, but I wouldn't think the tournament. I think the tournament will go ahead. The show will go on, but it's whether it can go on in the will teams be missing 20 players because they've had an outbreak in their camp? Will we have full crowds? Will people be able to travel? Like, the great thing about Six Nations, and my dad made friends with a group of Welsh men in the 70s, and they've been going over and back to each other every year. Yeah. But they haven't done it for the last couple of years, and there's plans for some of them to come over this time. That's now looking a bit suspect because they all stay in each other's houses, and there's all sorts of things going on. So and Wales are up first, so that's the fun. And like, you usually have a massive amount of Welsh people coming over on the boat and on the planes, and they add so much to it. So it would be diluted a little bit if that was affected in that way. We'll
talk Munster with Ronan O'Gara later on. The Munster just seem to be in a small bit of a malaise at the minute. Not a good Christmas.
Well, like, they're like, if you look at their numbers, they've had a decent season. They've only lost 2 games, so it's not like it's a crisis. But they've lost their 2 most important coaches have decided they're leaving, having said they were going to stay, and they were just really abject against Connacht, and they've put themselves in a really bad spot. And it's only a couple of weeks ago that they came back from that South Africa thing, and that, like, most of their squad, 34 players in isolation, none of their coaches there, and they put together a team kind of experienced players and young kids who no one had ever heard of, went to Coventry and beat Wasps, and there was just a real sense of momentum behind them. And they were really, like, there was a real buzz over there. Their crowd went, a lot of people travelled. There was a really good atmosphere. Peter O'Mahony was buzzing. They played really well. They played really ambitious stuff. And then they came home and they brought some of their frontliners back. They were terrible, like, against Cast in victory. And they went down to Galway last weekend on New Year's Day. And, like, there's loads of excuses for it, and they're valid excuses because it's been 9 weeks since a lot of them played, and they were, some of them had COVID and all that sort of stuff. But they were abject. They were really, only lost by 2 points as well, but they were really, really poor, and they played with very little ambition, and they kind of spent 5 minutes on the Connacht line, and they can have their gripes about referees and stuff like that, but they conceded 17 penalties. They made loads of mistakes, and they're like, they should be better than this. They have on paper, they should be Connacht, and they should at least attack games with more ambition. And that's where I would, I think there's a kind of a line out there now that, they should just drive Van Grant to the airport and get rid of him now and just bring in Ian Costello, who managed that game against Wasps, and move on. And you can't do that in rugby. You got to kind of stick with it. Although I wonder, are they, you just wonder about why they were giving Van Grant a 2-year extension in the first place when they play with such little ambition, and why they were so happy with what they have when it's evidently not great. It's not getting the most out of the players they have. They're the second strongest squad in this competition, and yet they can just play so badly. And when they're one of these teams that when they lose and when they play badly, they're really bad to watch as well, and it just feeds into a kind of a bit of despair. But, like, they got Ulster on Saturday in Thomond. If they win again, like, they'll be out of this red column. They're not in any, it's not like they're in real danger or anything like that, but they're just they're like bad to watch when they're bad. You know what I mean? Like, they really stink out the joint when they're not on it.
What'll the atmosphere be like in Thomond against Ulster now?
Like 5,000 in Thomond, it's not like Thomond sells out every week in, week out anyway, but 5,000 would be a very small crowd, and it's one of those venues. I think when we came out of COVID and we were doing social distancing, they spread numbers around the stadiums very well, and it actually really worked. You wouldn't think it would work, but it kind of meant there was noise everywhere. Depends on whether they put them all in one stand. That kind of, I think, loses the atmosphere. So it's hard to know. It's really hard to know how it'll be. It'll be better than an empty Thomond, and if they're behind the team, there's no better place to watch a rugby match. And if the team play with ambition and give them something to get behind, then they'll O'Mahony will be back, Tyke Byrne will be back, some of their best players will be back, but Ulster will be strong as well. That's going to be a really good game this weekend. Hopefully it goes ahead. Ulster have had their COVID issues, but I did their press conference yesterday, and they don't know who they have yet, but they hope to have enough players to be able to field the team. So they should be coming down with a decent side.
Yeah.
But this is another thing, like, how have they been affected by having 2 weeks down, whereas Munster had their problems in November, early December.
How big is the next managerial appointment there, like, for Munster?
It's massive, yeah. It's well, it sets the entire tone and direction of the club and the structure of the whole thing as well, because, like, Ronan O'Gara, who we're talking to later, he's the director of rugby at La Rochelle. He does the signings, the contracts, and then he has a team of coaches in place who kind of put together the nuts and bolts. Whereas Munster are trying to have a guy who does everything in Van Gran, and he wasn't really qualified for that job. He's a very good coach by all accounts, but he'd never been that kind of all-seeing kind of old-fashioned manager figure. Leinster have split that job in 3. So I think Munster might look at trying to bring in someone above a coach, then have a dedicated coaching team. But, like, O'Gara would have been the one that everyone wanted to get the job. He ruled himself out very quickly. So, David Nucifori, our RFU performance director, will have a key role in this, but he's in Australia on his holidays at the moment. He takes kind of a month out every season in the middle of it all. Somehow he's able to do this, goes home to Australia, and no doubt he's checking his messages, but he's not really driving this at the forefront, so we don't know where it's going to go. They do have Graham Rowntree in there, who's a very good coach. There's a couple of Mike Prendergast at Racing is someone I think they'll look at. He's a very good coach. Noel McNamara, who's from Munster, coached at Leinster, is now with the Sharks in South Africa. He's a name that keeps cropping up as well. There's been a lot of talk about kind of getting a big name in. Maybe Declan Kidney comes back as a kind of that director of rugby. I don't know. I mean, we're still at the point where I'm kind of just throwing out names, but it'll be very interesting. It's massive. Like, the head coach is so influential in rugby and sets such a tone. So I think that I'd love to see them go away from the South African model, lean in towards New Zealand maybe, and that kind of more freer side of play, because they've got really good athletes and really good ball players, and right now all they're doing is chasing box kicks half the time.
Worst team to watch of the 4 provinces.
When they're off it, yeah. I mean, when they're on it, when they get it right, they're great. You know, they've great players, they've great energy, they have the skills to unlock teams, and like there's nothing wrong with a conservative game plan when it's fully executed. It's when they're off, they just get bogged down, and they don't have. Ultimately, what's their problem is they play a game that's dependent on bullying teams up front, but they don't have the pack to do that, so they need to find another way. They're kind of, they're able to beat 90% of the teams they playing the way they play. But then they get against Leinster, or they come up against the big French team or English teams at the elite end of Europe, and even when they perform, they just can't quite get over the line because they're relying on something that they can't really do. So there are, and like the big thing, I mean, we'll get to it. Ronan, like he's talked about that in his column, recruitment and all that sort of stuff that he already done. Who's doing the recruitment down there now? Like who's identifying which players are kept on, which players are let go? Who's coming in for next season? Dialande and Snyman, the 2 big South African signings, and Jason Jenkins, who's another Springbok, all out of contract at the end of the season. Are they going to go with Van Grant to Bath? Like is he doing recruitment for them?
The whole isn't great at the moment, like in the sense of
thing.
Yeah.
Like they'll say they're all pulling in the same direction. If you're a fringe player down there and Van Grant's telling you what to do, you're looking at him going, well, you're not going to be here next season, so I don't have to listen to you. If you're out of contract, you're wondering, is this guy giving me? There's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts in play, and that's where I think there's it risks coming apart a little bit, which is a real shame because they have the squad to do something this season, and they have they had such momentum going into December, and they've just squandered it somehow with the coaching announcement, with games being called off through no fault of their own. Like the Leinster game was because of an outbreak in Leinster's camp, and then to turn up in Galway and play really, really badly with all the mitigating factors, it's just disappointing. But like again, it's not terminal. They beat Ulster this weekend. They qualify. They could be one of the top seeds coming out of the European pools. They'll suddenly be a feel-good factor in a couple of weeks' time. Just right now, after that game, and with everything that's gone on with the coaching stuff, it just feels like they're just squandering a real chance right now. But it's far from terminal. Yeah,
so the Gillette performance rankings, Munster are in the red this morning. That was probably a short head enough in terms of Mount Bellew Moylaw. Mount Bellew Moylaw obviously lost to Pearses. It was a few weeks ago now. In very controversial circumstances. Within the game and obviously without the game, because afterwards the referee had to deal with kind of, I guess, some physical altercations really involving the Mount Bellew Moylaw players. But the referee's report has come out, and I quote, "After I blew my whistle to signal the end of the game, I was knocked forward due to being pushed strongly in my back. One of my umpires, Brendan Healy, told me after the game there was on Cregan Muilocha player wearing the number 15 jersey, Barry McHugh, who had pushed me with force from behind. I was then verbally abused and subjected to threatening conduct by a number of players, and so on and so forth." So obviously this would be a club local to me. I know feelings down home about the refereeing of the game were very, very strong. It was a 1-point game. Mount Bellew Moylaw had performed heroics after a lot of near misses to win a Galway title at the behest of Corofin, and obviously fancied their chance then of going on and win Connacht. This didn't come to pass, and there were probably grievances about the performance of the referee, but a lot of strong bands are going to come out of this, out of what happened in the immediate aftermath of the game. And I don't think these lads have any excuses. I think it's very, very hard for referees to come into sport in general at the moment, particularly Gaelic games, and these were not nice scenes.
No, I have to say it passed me by at the time. I just picked up on it yesterday when Tommy was kind of running me through what was going on in the show, and it was pretty shocking stuff. I mean, anyone who played sport with me would be rolling their eyes hearing me moralising about players losing their rag with referees. I wasn't the greatest in that regard, but certainly if the referee's report is on the money, like you can't lose the head in that way and say the things that they said or they allegedly said to the referee and not expect some sort of repercussions. It speaks to a culture really in the GAA where the referee, and again, it's like a rugby person moralising about respecting referees. I mean, it's one of the great
that's
myths
fair,
of rugby.
Yeah, but
it's overblown, but it doesn't. Certainly, you don't get abused to this level.
Well, you're not going to get pushed. You're
not going to get pushed. You're not going to get effed and blinded out of it.
7 players are up for suspensions here. 7 players.
Yeah, it's remarkable. They just obviously collectively lost the head as a team, and I'm sure it's really embarrassing. Like, it must be really
I have
embarrassing
sympathy
now,
for the players in the sense that they should have regrets. And in the old days, this was in the referee's report, it was in the match report. It's now on TV, and it's now everyone can see it. But you have to put yourself in the referee's shoes here. The referee left that stadium feeling utterly intimidated, and if there were 30 players in the pitch that started the game, how many of them had 5 out of 10 performances? Maybe the ref had a 5 out of 10 performance, and it's completely magnified. And you have to think of the mental health difficulties of a referee, not to mind the physical altercation and feeling afraid, because he's not surrounded by bodyguards or anything like that after the game. He's surrounded by Montpellier Mylaw players who obviously did lose the rag. But I think we really need to start thinking about future referees here. And why don't any of your mates want to become referees? Partly one of the reasons they don't want to be in a situation like that, and where they're vilified from the stands, and then after the game, excuses will be made for the players when the referee might have had a shocker of a game, but he didn't mean to do that. He might have had a bad game. He needs a lot more protection than this.
It's also an impact of the GAA effectively shutting down the inter-county season for half of the year and shining a light onto the different corners of their game, which I think it's great for the club players, and I know it's a big debate all the time about club players, and the whole thing is rooted in the club player. But if you are showing semi-finals of county games on national television, which wouldn't even have got national newspaper coverage 20 years ago unless there was a row, and the row would be reported by some a freelancer who was there, suddenly you're beaming the kind of dirty little kind of corners of the game into and players have to have a responsibility. Like you're these lads, if they'd done this when it wasn't on TV, or it wasn't, if there was inter-county on this week, or on the week it happened, it would be buried everywhere, and they move on. Whereas they're now being in the public eye, being being discussed on, national radio, national papers, all that sort of stuff, and it's a huge responsibility for amateur players who are really just representing their parish in big games, and they should they obviously have to have self-respect and respect for the person that's volunteered. I know they probably get, I don't know if they get a few bob in the GA, but referees usually get some small.
They get a nominal amount.
Yeah, nominal,
but it's interesting.
But effectively a volunteer, to do that, and it just shines such a bad light on their team. Like their whole town has been this, or is it a village? I don't know. It's been kind of.
Yeah, it's a couple of towns, obviously Montpellier, Mylaw, but when I was playing back in the day, the referees, a lot of them were interesting characters, and a lot of them you'd find them quite difficult to deal with at times when they'd make mistakes, and that's what kind of annoyed me. But a lot of the reason why characters end up being referees, because a lot of other people will just not do it, so you'll end up with this broad spectrum of individuals who become referees. But it's not a challenging proposition at the minute for a young person to become a referee, and I think Val Daly, the Montpellier Mylaw manager, needs to come out, and as much as he needs to defend his players, we need to put out there that this is not acceptable. Even if the referee had a 0 out of 10 performance, he didn't do that deliberately trying to lose the game for Montpellier Mylaw, and I know the stakes are really, really high. I know they thought they might have had a chance getting to Croke Park, but think of that referee going to bed that night, and you can be sure he didn't come out of the ground with 20 people going up to him saying, "God, I'm really sorry for what happened to you there." He would have been left alone, and people would have cursed him going home in their cars. And you have to think of him in this situation, because even if he did have a bad game, and I'm not saying he did, I didn't watch the game, it's not fair, and it needs to be set out in very clear tones that this is not acceptable, because there are massive mental health ramifications for a referee in this situation, I think.
Yeah, there are. I mean, there are some referees who love it. There are, maybe don't love it to that extent, but
the notoriety.
A little bit, yeah. I think that it attracts it. It's. I mean, why
they don't love being surrounded by 7 or 8 players?
The physically intimidating stuff is not it's just not on. It's clearly not on. It almost goes without saying that it's not on. And we've seen it at the elite level of rugby during the summer with the Lions tour and Rassie Erasmus, filming an hour-long video criticising the referee, and the referee Nick Berry subsequently come out and said how difficult it's been, basically shaking his confidence as a ref. He's fallen down a level since that happened. So in a sport that's supposed to be about respect of rugby and all that nonsense that we hear from that, the official side of the game. But certainly this is another extreme of that. When the tone is set, and it's set by inter-county managers, it's set by players.
It's endemic. It's endemic in the game.
It's in football as well.
Games. It is. It's endemic, and in football is. I think footballers should be punished more for the abuse of referees, verbal abuse and stuff like that. I think if the referees know the players and have a chat beforehand, it really, really helps. And I think League of Ireland referees, some of them are very good. They'll have good games, they'll have bad games, but if you put yourself in the referee's shoes for those last 5-10 minutes, he's had to make probably a lot of very, very tough calls. And if you're burdened by that pressure of the intimidation, it's going to skew you as well. Like, so we're all human here. I don't know. I hope this is a watershed in terms of Gaelic games. But we do have other things to get to. LOI to Scotland. This is like remember the Donegal potato pickers back in the day when there was no work in Ireland? They go over to Scotland for the summer, get their work. A lot of them stayed over there. Strong links between Scotland and Ulster and all that. Strong links between the LOI and Scotland now. Kenny Shields, Northern Ireland women's coach, former Derry City manager, who also is coaching the SPL. He's very, very interesting views in the Star today, which are well worth reading about the standard difference here, or lack thereof in times. So you have Johnny Kenny, who's strongly linked to the move to Celtic. Dan Cleary has gone as well in the last couple of days. I was actually talking to him yesterday. I was talking to Ross Tierney, who joined Motherwell. Dan Cleary's gone to St Johnstone. Ross Tierney's gone to Motherwell. We'll talk to him tomorrow, hopefully, on the show. Liam Scales has done well for Celtic, and obviously Jamie McGrath. Jamie McGrath would not be playing for Ireland, but for what he's done for St Mirren. I think that's the bottom line why it appeals to players. And
he's shown a path. I think you could throw in, it's slightly beyond the scope a little bit, but James Brown, the Drogheda United right back, going to the Blackburn under-23s when he's a first team player here, I think is from the same. I think it's about the food chain.
Yeah.
It's the football food chain, and it's where Ireland's place is. And if Ireland wants to be taken seriously as a football nation, our league should not be losing players to a country of a similar size like Scotland. But at the moment, Scotland,
we don't have a Celtic or Rangers. We don't have a Celtic or Rangers.
There's one thing losing a player to Celtic like Liam Scales or potentially Johnny Kenny, but losing players to teams like Motherwell and like Jamie McGrath going to St Mirren, wasn't it?
Yeah, but
like that is.
I don't have an issue with it.
I've no issue with it right now. But our ambition should be.
They say here.
I mean, it's like Scotland has a football industry. They treat their footballers seriously. They've got proper football clubs. Their football clubs are institutions. They're in the community. They attract big crowds, and they're higher up on the football food chain than we are.
Yeah.
You are more likely to get. It's a launch pad for your career. So Jamie McGrath does well at Dundalk. He moves to St Mirren, which they haven't been in the Europa League group stages as far as I'm aware, but Dundalk have been. But Dundalk playing one of the worst grounds in Ireland in a league that features part-time players, that only lasts 42 weeks or whatever, that has people getting not paid in the off season. Like these are all the things that go on in the League of Ireland, and he goes to St Mirren, and now he's going to probably get a move somewhere better as a result. And he's also an established Irish international. And from Ross Tierney's point of view, I saw there was a lovely video released by Motherwell when he went over, and he has a Bows backpack on. Like I'm a group of middle-aged Bows fans, older than myself, who were like, half of them were in tears watching.
Are you middle-aged now?
I'm on the younger in this WhatsApp group, but I'm getting there. I'm 40 next year, so 40 this year now.
Keep it up anyway.
Yeah, but like they were in tears watching Ross Tierney with his Bows backpack going around Motherwell and meeting all the staff and stuff. But what he said was like, I'm coming from a part-time environment, and he's training 4 times a week with Bows. He's playing in a good league. He played in Europe. He was one of the best players. But for Bows had a season. He played in the Aviva in front of 44,000. But he considers that he's now a footballer because he has gone to a proper.
He's gone to an industry.
A proper league.
So when we get to the papers, this is the Star. Now we'll get the papers. Irish Eyes, AYES, and it's Kenny Shields talking about the players. So we have Aaron McAniff, who's interestingly mentioned as well, whose time at Hearts, according to Kenny Shields, actually isn't going that well because of the style of football that's being played by some clubs. But obviously Scales is kind of the big one. But Ross Tierney, who has a very, very interesting story to tell in terms of his personal life as well. Hopefully we'll get to that tomorrow, but an absolute shining example of what can happen in the League of Ireland. But from the perspective of the player, Rudd, as you say, you can't blame him. You cannot blame him for making that step. He's now going to be playing against Celtic and Rangers.
I know you brought through the fairly facetious comparison to the Donegal and the famine and stuff, but like right now, as far as I'm aware, the offers that are on the table in the League of Ireland are quite good for good players. And these players, like Dan Cleary, pretty much had every team in the league, that worth its salt, throwing a good deal. Like Bows, who have up until now pretty much exclusively thrown out 1-year deals, have been signing players on more than 2-year deals. They're offering good terms. They're offering long-term security as well, which hasn't been a factor. I know Pats are doing the same. I know Dundalk are doing the same. Rovers are obviously doing it as well. And there's like for this tier of player that's going to Scotland, there are good options to stay at home. But if you're 22, 23, older players than Ross Tierney, like Dan Cleary's much older than that. I think he's about 27, isn't he? But he's
also come back from Britain, so he probably had this sense of mission retrieval as well, where he wanted one last go at the UK, and I respect that. Ross is a little bit different.
Yeah, and like say James Brown going to Blackburn, this might be his best chance to go and at least give it a go and be a Blackburn Rovers player and or be a play for Motherwell, play against Celtic and Rangers, catch the eye and and get your move. I've absolutely no objection to the players going and doing it. I completely understand why they do. But
you're totally right.
If you're
we need to have an industry. Exactly. We shouldn't really be losing players to middle ranking to lower ranking Scottish teams. No. Essentially, I can completely see what
right now. I completely understand why we are. But if we're to aspire to having a serious football country, it shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't be relying on managers in England and Scotland to play our players so that the national team can pick them. There's loads of examples of players that Stephen Kenny would love to be picking. Aaron Connolly's obviously making his move this week. Jason Knight might be moving up in the ranks, but then he has to impress Bielsa and get into the Leeds team if he gets there. You've got Kelleher on the bench for Liverpool. There's so many examples, and they're probably possibly not even the best examples of it. Whereas if you have a functioning league here, at least you'll have a group of players who are playing at a good level. But we don't have that right now. We've a league that I love and that you love, but it's not anywhere near what Scotland have.
On the plus side, Kenny Shields' point of view is that the football standard and the technical qualities and the way that teams play here in the league, generally from top to bottom in the Premier Division, is actually at odds with the way the SPL teams function at the lower rung. Now, I don't watch enough of SPL to know this, and again, the pitches are probably not great this time of year, but Kenny Shields' point is that actually the standard of football in a certain way is better in the LOI than the bottom of the SPL because teams don't kick it long as much, and I can attest that if you haven't gone to League of Ireland games, you're not a regular, and you're probably from a part of this country that doesn't have a League of Ireland club because there are large swathes of it that doesn't, you may not know that actually the standard of football and the style of football has improved exponentially thanks to summer football and thanks to coaching and thanks to the commitment of players. Number 2 on the performance rankings, so we're getting good. Gordon Elliott, Green. I'm sure you're watching the racing over the Christmas week.
Was not, Johnny. I'm going to let you take this one because the racing passes me by largely. So I get most of my stuff from reading and listening to you. Brian
O'Connor, I have to find this what he wrote yesterday in the Irish Times, actually. Brian O'Connor had an interesting article yesterday, which was essentially 10 things that racing could do to improve itself / its image in 2020. One of them was... and this is just 2022, sorry. Finally, all of us are effectively lab rats for this information gathering, pain for profit, frontier justice, social media age, voluntarily carrying digital septic tanks in our pockets and wondering why so many are so unhappy, right? So Brian is a great character. He's quite curmudgeonly at times in the press room, and his articles reflect that. But he's a brilliant writer, the leading racing journalist outside the Racing Post in Ireland right now, and he's spoken about the challenging year that racing had, much of which involved Gordon Elliott back in March, as you remember, photographing a dead horse. Took his punishment, took his 6-month ban, took it on the chin, returned with an absolute vengeance at Christmas, and won the Savills Chase, one of 3 Grade 1s I think he's won over the last few weeks, beating Aplu Tart, who's owned by Cheveley Park, who only abandoned him after the whole mess in March. So Cheveley Park abandoned him. Galvin got up in the line under David Russell, who himself came back at the age of 42 from 11 months off, injured, gets up in the line, unbelievable ride. And then on Sunday, he wins Nace's only Grade 1 of the season with the very exciting Ginto, who's owned by Noel and Valerie Moran. Noel and Valerie Moran made a lot of money, but they're investing it in Gordon Elliott's. Big fan of me, GA as well, has involved in Bective, his local club. I think he's involved in the ladies team as well. But Gordon Elliott has gone full swing. And I talk about mental health. I've no doubt Gordon Elliott's mental health was in a very, very bad way. I think people were actually worried for him because everything that happened around that time was in the papers. It was all over the news, all over the world. Like leading American sports news kind of bulletins included photos of Gordon Elliott on this horse. He's accepted it. He's worked hard during his suspension. He's come back and he's had an unbelievable Christmas. And I think he's a sign, if you're starting off January in a bad way, things can and will get better. Briefly, we have the best of the best, and this is Man City. The performance rankings for Gillette. 11 wins on the bounce. If you're talking about the Shamrock Rovers, the League of Ireland title, I mean, this has just gone from being interesting to, in almost no time, being gone. Yeah, the title is dead. The title, and I'm sure Man City fans enjoyed yesterday evening seeing Man United losing 1-0 as well. Yeah, I probably did. Yeah, I think they did. I think Man City fans have no truck with the fact that their team is that much better than everyone else. I think Souness on the weekend called it they're the best squad in English football history. I have a big problem with Man City because part of me just loves the way they play and part of me loves the consistency under Guardiola as much as they want to win the Champions League and they can almost like park the league now and just concentrate on that. Part of me just hates the funding of it and just that whole like it's just financial fair play and blah blah blah.
I find them very cold. I went to see Man City in the 90s. I was there the day Cathal scored that goal against Southampton.
That was the Man City that I remember in Main Road.
They were crap. Like that was probably the best moment of that entire decade for them, and then they went down into the and like. But
I bet you the atmosphere was way better back then than it is.
I love going to Main Road. I was a Liverpool fan, and we couldn't get tickets to Liverpool, so we went to Man City. But like that's the Man City that I have a kind of a romantic feel for. But I'm sure the fans don't really have. I'm sure most of them are really. Some of them maybe do, but I think most of them are loving the fact that their team is consistently excellent every week and plays the best football in the world. I find it very cold, very corporate. I would have major problems with the way they're funded. I wonder why these English fans who rioted against, no, not rioted, but who went up in arms against the Super League, don't seem to have any problem with these oil-rich nations buying up football teams and making them almost unbeatable across a long season. It's just I don't understand why you wouldn't be up in arms about this. And there's another one coming down the tracks. I mean, we're a couple of years away from it, but Newcastle are probably the only ones who can compete with them on a long-term basis. They're the mess now, but they'll eventually get it right.
That's the Saudi derby that's going to become such a feature of our lives. That's it for the performance rankings this week.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
So performance rankings. It's time for the papers. Apologies to Tommy, who's back in the hot seat today. I'm running 2 minutes over. That should have been 8:08, but instead it's 8:10, which means that we have to delve into the papers. Shall we start with the Star? We're going to ads? We are going to ads, sorry.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast? If not, here's some of what you've missed over the last week.
You look at the game last night and you think to yourself, this Manchester City team are going to be the first Premier League team to score 10 goals in a match. It is going to happen. We are going to reach that high water mark.
He flicks it over the midfield player's head and then swivels on it and hits it with his foot in the corner, and we all kind of stood there going, did he actually just do that?
We just put a picture of it up there, and you're in the corner of the screen watching it all unfold. Not closing them down either, I'd say, but there you go.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
With prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance, everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Yeah, if I'm doing an audition for more of these OTB AMs, not doing myself any favours because it's not actually the papers, it's Shane Keegan next, and Shane was probably worried that he was going to sit through 20 minutes of me and Rud going through the papers there rather than coming on. Good morning to you, Shane.
How are you, Johnny? Are you well?
What's going on?
All quiet. Isolating like most of the rest of the world at the moment.
Do you have the dreaded virus?
I do indeed, yeah. I don't know how I avoided it for as long as I had now, to be honest with you. But hunkering down here for the next 10 days or so.
How do you feel?
Not too bad. If you hear a little bit of spluttering and coughing, apologies. You know where it's coming from.
We'll start with Man United. Lots of I don't know. I'm not going to lie. I find it a little bit of a. I don't know, like a hamster on the wheel here that just goes on and on and on. We talk about Man United, they win a game, they lose a game. You know, Bruno Fernandes missed a good chance which may have won them the game last night, but they lose the game 1-0. Obviously to Wolves were not a bad side. What did you make of it?
Yeah, pretty. I think you hit the nail on the head. Same old really. I'm getting close to I told you so territory. I think myself, yourself, Dan and JD were talking about United a couple of weeks ago, and they had finally kind of won a game or two, and I think he kind of reckoned it was only inevitable that they were going to take off and get the remaining Champions League spot. But at the time I wasn't as convinced as you, and I'm certainly still not at this stage, really, to be honest with you. I don't know, Johnny. I just don't think the character is there amongst that group of players. I really, really don't. But it isn't. I mean, because
who are the leaders?
You know, who are the leaders? Who are, the body language, I know I'm pointing to obvious things here, but the body language is just horrendous. I mean, you can tell so much about a group of players in terms of how do they react when the ball goes into the back of the net. And look, I know I know everybody is not a Harry Kane fan, but obviously as a Spurs fan, I'd probably be watching more of Spurs than anybody else. And I always like when something goes wrong for Spurs, Harry Kane is very, very quick to start, pumping the hands as much as say, come on, boys, let's get ourselves going. And he's big into this, pointing at the heads, come on, boys, let's get the heads right kind of a thing. And even just small things like that, I might be reading too much into, but things like that can make a difference. You need 3 or 4 lads in your side whose immediate reaction is to do that rather than immediate reaction. I mean, watching back John Moutinho's goal last night, the first thing I noticed out of the corner of my eye as the ball is going into the corner is you just see Shaw is the only one you can see. Luke Shaw, and his 2 arms are up in the air, and he's giving it that again straight away. And it's just I don't care who the man. Now I don't think the manager's formation and tinkering is helping things, but I honestly don't believe it matters who the manager is at Manchester United at the moment, really. In
fairness, Rory, to Shane, he did say this, like when Rangnick got the job, he said, like, pound for pound in terms of what Solskjaer's done here, I don't think the players are actually much better, or if at all better, than the position that they're in. What did you make of the game last night? Because the 4-2-2-2, 2-2-2-2, the Ronaldo situation, they've just been actually quite poor since he took over anyway.
Wolves were very good.
Wolves are a good side.
They are a good side, but I think if you're a well-drilled, tactically organised team like Wolves seem to be, and I haven't seen a lot of Wolves this year, and wouldn't, they've kind of passed me by, but I was quite impressed by them. I think United are a perfect team to play against because they're so ragged, and if you're well organised, if you know your stuff, you can probably cause them all sorts of problems. But it's just still remarkable to me to see teams like Wolves going to Man United and dominating at Old Trafford, in the way that they did. But I think, like Shane can talk to the challenge of being, coming in mid-season. A manager like Rangnick, who seems to be such a project manager and kind of a long-term thinker and one of these kind of great thinkers of the game, as far as where we were led to believe by the 1,500 profile pieces that came out when he got the job. He's not a guy to come in midway through the season and turn things around, because you can't do a tactical reboot at Christmas, and to try and do that with. They're not bad players. They're all they seem to be just a random collection of individuals who don't fit together, and there's no plan for them. So you're trying to do all that at the same time. It just seems like, and they had a COVID outbreak as well. So it seems like almost an impossible job for someone like that. They almost needed someone, just a big personality to come in and just get them organised, get them out there. But it's a weird job. It's a weird club at the moment.
Because I suppose by contrast as well, the way Spurs and Arsenal lost against Man City, they actually played very well though, Shane. And even Wolves, there are some resurgent teams there in that battle for the top 4, for that 4th position. But what's gone wrong tactically from the perspective from your own coaching perspective? Shane does excellent articles on the 42 about tactical analysis of games. I imagine it's not that hard to dissect what Man United are doing with this formation, and probably an inability to press in certain areas.
Yeah, look, I think he got an immediate bounce, as you would be hoping to do as a new manager. I think everybody was happy to shout from the rooftops in terms of the improvement in the pressing on the back of his first game, and the numbers stood up that there was a big jump in terms of the pressing in that first game. I'd be really, really interested to see the pressing numbers last night compared to the pressing numbers when Solskjaer was there, because
is it better?
Maybe I'm wrong. I wouldn't have thought so last night. I wouldn't have thought so. I would have thought it was reverting to the mean again, really, to be honest with you, because you can only when players have the kind of personalities that the United lads have, they will revert back to human nature, their own human nature, very, very quickly.
So you're calling out their personalities here, Shane?
The personalities, playing style, application. I don't know what way you put it, but there's definitely. There's a lack of any kind of real desire to work hard there. I think that's definitely fair enough to say.
Across the team, effectively?
Yeah. I think so. Maybe, and in some of them, maybe it's completely ingrained, and in some of them, maybe it's where their head is at this moment in time. I mean, to be fair, you would never have criticised Rashford in the past for a lack of work rate. So there are fellas there who have shown it before, but at the moment, sometimes under Solskjaer it was, it was the lack of cohesion to the pressing. Sometimes it was just a lack of interest in pressing. And, Rangnick was supposed to be the one who was going to fix all that. That hasn't really transpired in the longer term. And I suppose the strange one for me, Johnny, is I would have said when he came in that as an attacking team, they weren't too bad because they've got some extra fantastic attacking quality. And that obviously it was the defensive setup that he needed to try and really, really improve. And we've now got to the stage where he's completely ripped up the attacking template, and he's trying to bring in a whole new attacking template. And
which is
defensive.
what?
Well, obviously the formation that he's going with, the 2-2-2-2, as you called it, how many twos we can put into something. It's, it definitely has the look of square pegs and round holes. I mean, how many? That relies on 2 number 10s playing in the system. I mean, how many number 10s have Manchester United got? They played with 2 number 10s last night and left their only true number 10 on the bench. So that definitely seemed, it's as I say, square pegs, round holes, definitely in that sense.
This is a point I've made a few times since Ronaldo has come in. What have the other offensive players done since Ronaldo has come in? And Ronaldo individually has had some obviously very good games, but I'd like to see the Man United's record since he came in prior to versus before he came in. But the other offensive players, I mean, they just seem to have fallen into a complete hole.
They do, yeah, and obviously that particularly Bruno Fernandes. I mean,
what's that about him? Sorry to interrupt, but that was even in the Portugal-Ireland games, that was obvious as well. There's no cohesion between the pair of them.
No, I don't know. I've you need the Andy Mittens of the world to explain what the actual relationship is like between two guys like that. I don't know. Are they two fellas who get on very, very well or not? I did find it. I did find it very interesting last night that Bruno Fernandes took that last free kick. I think that potentially means that, I'd look at that and I'd say, okay, well, maybe there is one person in this dressing room that Ronaldo is willing to listen to, or is willing to maybe play second fiddle to. Because, I mean, as soon as he went down and they got the free, you went, okay, here's Ronaldo, who numerous articles have shown of recent is actually one of the worst free kick takers in the world based on the amount of attempts he's had versus the success he's had. And then he stepped up and didn't take the free, which, I thought, okay, I actually thought that was something of a positive sign. But like Fernandez's form last year, lads, it's kind of beginning to be forgotten. Like he was incredible. I mean, he was. I know Ronaldo has been good since he came to the club, but Fernandes was better. Fernandes was absolutely incredible for Manchester United last season. And if the plus of Ronaldo's arrival and the plus of his performances also has to equal the downturn in Bruno Fernandes' performances, well, there's no sum gain there because what one lad is bringing has completely dropped off and what the other lad was bringing. So that, effectively, that's not a step forward at all.
It was interesting, I thought, that Sancho didn't give him the ball in that first half chance when Ronaldo went on the overlap and maybe, I don't know, is that Sancho not giving him the ball when he's in a better position and Fernandes taking the free kick off him? Is that some form of influence of maybe people trying, are they being told not to defer to Ronaldo all the time? But what do you make of him, Shane? Because he was the big signing before Ronaldo came along, and he was the great hope that they signed, and then just got shoved aside for the old timer who came in, and just they don't seem to have a plan for him, or they didn't certainly before Rangnick came in.
No, definitely not. I was watching it last night, Rory, and I was half expecting Ronaldo to give the old sign across to the subs bench to get him off, and he didn't.
But he didn't react. He didn't even you'd expect Ronaldo to kind of throw his hands up in the air, but he almost seemed like maybe he thought it was the right option, just done badly. But I don't know, is he resigned to his own fate, Ronaldo, at this stage? But he didn't even throw his toys out of the pram that time, which I thought was really weird.
No, he didn't. Their decision making actually early on in the final third, Rory, was really poor, wasn't it? Because he also had the Cavani one where he should have slipped Greenwood on the outside when he was coming around him. They could have made life a bit easier on themselves in that sense. But no, Sancho, I mean, again, he's probably victim of the fact that they don't have a settled system. They don't have a settled position for him. He seems to be getting into the team, out of the team in one position when he's in it. Then the next time he gets a run, he's over in a different position. There's different players around them all of the time. And look, that is chicken and egg. Obviously, I've been on that wheel where the reason you're chopping and changing the team so much, people will say, you need consistency to start getting results. Well, unfortunately, the results tends to come before the consistency. You get results, and therefore you follow that with consistency. And that's kind of as I say, that's the wheel that they're stuck on at the moment. But like as Johnny was saying, it can apply to absolutely everybody, Rory. I mean, Ronaldo individually, in terms of goal scoring aside, Scott McTominay maybe playing a bit above his curve as well, but the vast majority of that Manchester United side are just way below what we would expect them as both individuals, and then obviously that transfers into what they are as a team.
Surely, Shane, the best way that they can play is the way that they played when they were at their best under Solskjaer, which was reliant on a lot of pace and attacking dynamism on the break, which Ronaldo will not bring you, I'm sorry. And having like a good kind of sitting system where basically Fred and McTominay can protect that back four, albeit the back four has to be playing a lot better than it is. Because since Ronaldo has come in, there's no structure to what they're doing at all, apart from starting Ronaldo.
So are you leaving him out?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I don't think he brings balance to the team because he doesn't have the pace on the break, and Man United aren't really a possession team. So, Ronaldo's a big problem. Look at their record since Ronaldo has come in, and look at how badly they've played almost 80% of the games, we'll say.
Yeah, well, firstly, it's not going to happen. Whatever about us arguing whether it should happen or shouldn't happen, it's not going to happen.
Turns 37 next month.
Yeah, I can assure you, 100% assure you that a fit Cristiano Ronaldo will start 90% of Manchester United games.
Is that a problem? Is that a problem?
Is it a problem? Look, I get where it is a problem. I get where you're coming from. It is a problem, definitely. But when it's a problem, when it's not an option to drop him, and it's not an option to drop him, I'm telling you, it's just, it can't be done. Last night he was captain. It's upwards he's going in the trajectory.
The man is 37 next month. It's like Joe Biden. Where are we going to get this right? He's too old to perform at this level. And Manchester City and Liverpool go to Old Trafford and absolutely batter Man United, partly because they can't press.
Yeah, it ain't going to happen. I'm just telling you, it's definitely not going to happen. All right. So if it's not going to happen, well, then it's all about trying to come up with a system that accommodates them as best as possible.
Which is what?
Well, I still think they can play on the counter attack with him there. I think he becomes the first phase and the third phase of that counter attack. In other words, you sit deep, you play out to Ronaldo rather than playing beyond Ronaldo. You play out to Ronaldo. He then sets it back to your Bruno Fernandes, let's say. And then if you're playing 4-2-3-1, let's say, which I would have thought is the best way of getting the most out of them, and your left and your right are go with whatever you want, Sancho, Greenwood, Rashford, choose whoever you want from those players. So the ball goes up to Ronaldo, comes back to Bruno Fernandes, and those boys are then on the run down the line, and you're trying to get them away, and now Ronaldo backs up that attack, and he's the player that you come back to. So that, a counter-attack doesn't necessarily have to be an immediate outball that Ronaldo spins onto. I suppose the problem in what I've named there is that a hell of a lot of the time the best attacking player that they've had in some games has been Cavani. And there's no place for him in that setup.
He's only 35, isn't he?
A young fella compared to the other lad.
Bloody hell.
And look, in all of that then, what happens when Pogba comes back? Or is he ever coming back?
We could actually, to be fair, I'm quite bored about the Man United chat, and I shouldn't be saying that as a presenter. But today I'm energised because Shane Keegan, he brings that dynamism despite COVID. And in fairness, it's great that we're in a situation where somebody may have COVID, and this will happen over the next few weeks, but is still able to dial in and sounds perfectly healthy. And hopefully we're getting to the end of this. Shane, we've about 3 minutes to talk about LOI players moving to Scotland. Rory O'Connor made an impassioned plea to Irish football, to government, to everyone. We need a football industry in this country. Fortunately, we don't have one. That's why players are going to Scotland.
Yeah, 100%. Look, I've said it to you before, as on our pro licence, Johnny, we went across to Scotland. The pro licence group of 16 was split up into 4 groups of 4, and each of those 4 groups was sent into a different club. We flew into Glasgow, and we were sent into 4 clubs reasonably around the Glasgow perimeter, excluding Celtic and Rangers. And all of us came back with the same stories. These were the smaller satellite clubs around Glasgow. Mine was St. Mirren. And we all came back with just we were just blown away by the fact that it was a complete and utter different level in terms of the professionalism of everything that went with football at each of these clubs. And you can have your moaning and this and that some players are taking a step backwards by going to some of the clubs that they are over there. They're not. They're quite simply not. They're going into a proper football industry where they feel like a proper professional full-time footballer. And I can see why the Dan Clearys or anybody else like that is making that move. And it's going to continue to happen for a long time yet. We have made serious steps in the right direction. We need to continue to make those steps in the right direction. But for the moment, like your Dan Clearys, there's no way in the world you're going to turn down an opportunity like that.
It's like, how do we change that, Shane? Like, how do we? I mean, it's probably not a question to be asked. About a minute left on the running order. But like, we can't accept our place in the pecking order in that way, can we? Because Scotland is the same size as us. I know it's 100 years of history that we're trying to upend, but it seems very negative to just accept that our players have to go there, to get on the ladder.
Yeah, you say we're a country similar size, Scotland. You're right, Rory. Like, what's the big difference? And this is coming from a fella who has 1 foot in both camps. The big difference is the GEA. Scotland don't have to contend with the GEA, and that is the number one reason, in my mind. No matter what else you look at, that is the number one reason. In terms of finance, in terms of attendances, in terms of fighting for people's hearts, all of that kind of thing. That is the big thing that sometimes people leave out of the conversation, and it is one thing that just has to be factored in when we're trying to come up with any plan,
If any neighbours are listening in, Shane, anything they can bring to your front door to get you through these harrowing times?
Cough bottle, probably, Johnny, is top of the list.
That'll do. Great to talk to you.
Cheers, Shane. Go well soon.
Next, we'll get to the sports pages. I think that is the cue to go to the sports page. It actually is. Well, this show is just—it's like we've been on
freewheeling, Johnny.
Freewheeling dinner. It's been, I have to apologise for some of the freewheeling going on here, but Shane was great. I think I don't know. I know I'll get slagged for saying that about Ronaldo, but at the same time, I've watched Man United enough to know that at the very least they're not functioning, and I'm not really sure why.
I think it's just that they're not a team that's planned by a coach. They're a team that's planned by a corporation, and they're put together. Ronaldo was signed as almost a statement to say that City couldn't get him, and because he was on the market, they should go and get him. Like, he wasn't signed with a specific role in mind. It would have been like the sliding doors moment of, if Guardiola had signed Ronaldo and had managed him for a season, that would have been even more interesting. But they're just like, you watch Chelsea Liverpool on Sunday, and the quality of that game. You watch even Arsenal City,
great game.
Which Arsenal were very well organised, very well coached, a lot of young players there as well. And then you compare it to what we saw like last night, which was wasn't even that entertaining. And Wolves were the better team, but played a better football. United had their chances, but they're a
bit like my performance this morning, all over the shop. Really, let's be honest.
Yeah,
Colin Mullaney will soon be in to talk a bit of Sligo Gaelic Games news actually, and an interesting game last night that I think was very attractive to sports photographers for various reasons. We'll start with the Star. I think you might have the Star as well, Rod. We'll get to the other papers as well. United we stand ? Snakebite is crowned king of the darts. I can't believe we haven't mentioned Snakebite.
No, we watched
in the hours. Leeds White Knight. This is a Paul Lennon story. Leeds are emerging as favourites to land Jason Knight in the January window, and 7 in the dock. That's the amount of my last story. Jason Knight, what do you make?
Leeds would be a great move for him, wouldn't it? Yeah, he's like one of probably the most promising players we have. Who's not a goalkeeper anyway. I think our top 3 most promising players are probably the goalkeepers. But no, really, that would be. You would love to see him get into a Bielsa team, because I think Bielsa would, give him the tactical foundation to go and then be a great, to fulfil his potential. I mean, we would hate to see him go. Like, Burnley are also keen on the Star, according to Paul Lennon.
Sean Dyche a fan, apparently.
Yeah, but that didn't work out great for Jeff Hendrick. And while Burnley are very well organised, good solid Premier League team, Leeds, there's something more about them. I think that would really stand to him as a move. But it's good that he's getting the notice. It's difficult. You got to choose the right club. You got to choose the right time to make your move. because we can see across, like we see Aaron Connolly moving the other way to go on loan to try and get game time. It's so cutthroat, it's so ruthless, and for these young Irish players who we all know have great potential, actually making it is so difficult. Some of them have made it with Ireland, but they haven't made it, like Adam Ida being the
it's very difficult.
Example.
It's a globalised league. Herald Sports, Shaw, we are not all united. And St Jude's midfielder joins up with Sligo. That's Pat Spillane Jr. We'll talk to Cathal about that. Is beloved Sligo. What do you got, Rud?
I'm looking at the mirror here. It's, Joe. How bad was that? A lot of Joe Moutinho. How long has Joe Moutinho been around, by the way?
He's 35 now. I saw him play when Wolves were in the championship, a game against Preston. I loved him. He's probably about
one of my favourite players of the last generation. Really good. Bit of Tuchel is doing the talking. The Ram Rao I saw somewhere else that Lukaku's apologised. One of the biggest storms in the teacup I've seen in quite some time.
What was that about? Like,
I don't know.
In all the trivialities of life, where like climate change is the only thing effectively that matters, then COVID, and then whatever else, family, and so on and so forth. Sport is somewhere down the list, and then you've Lukaku. What? Like, seriously, lads, how are we getting energised by this?
I don't know why you would, unless you wanted to lose your most expensive player of all time, for over an interview. It just doesn't make any sense. There's a story in the Mail here that asks Lukaku say sorry for interview, and then below that, PL clubs shock swoop for Ericsson, who has been bombed out of Inter because of his heart condition. But
that would be fascinating. I got a great to see him back play. I got to mention the Indo effectively has the same back page as the Herald, but Dan McDonnell, who'll be with me on Thursday, he has 10 dates to mark in your diary for 2022 across the men's and women's game, starting with Shelbourne versus Pats on the 1st of February 2018, when Damien Duff obviously will be taking on Tim Clancy in the dugout. There better be a full crowd at that if you're listening in government. We don't need any restrictions in the League of Ireland. Everything is absolutely fine. The Examiner, is this the bleakest, most frustrating of... In this bleakest, most frustrating of winters, everything is possible. Interesting article by Enda McAvoy there, and on the front we've got more Wolves. Colin Mullaney is waiting patiently outside. He's 2 cups of coffee for both of us. He's actually going to join us very shortly. What else do we have, Rud?
Have the Irish Times here.
Interesting article in the Times by Philip Lamb, actually, which is a repeat from the Guardian.
Yeah, you haven't seen Philip Lamb's byline in the Irish Times. Good hire, interesting.
Yeah.
To get as Qatar gets closer, it's even clearer that sport is politics. Well, it's good to see he's a former now, like a player of that status.
Yeah, he's some very good articles actually, and just there's a reference to a little bit of I can't remember who did it, but they did undercover sort of chats to essentially migrant workers in Qatar who work for poor money and live all in a room together and so on and so forth. It's a horrible World Cup. I know we're not going to be there, but honestly, I don't care that Ireland aren't at it. I'd have no interest in 8 stadia in a country of like 3 million people, built like basically slave labour partly.
Yeah.
You got anything else? You have the Times here. We lack motivation. Shaw slams United's attitude after embarrassing first defeat against Rangnick, and Lukaku has no desire to leave. Cathal Mullaney is in the house. My cues have been so bad today. Cathal may just disappear in front of our eyes. But he was to bring in 2 coffees, which Cathal don't appear to be here.
No, the coffee machine's not working, Johnny, unfortunately. Sorry
to
disappoint. We had it all arranged perfectly as well, and it's just not come off.
Sorry, can I just point out the coffee machine on the 3rd floor isn't working. The coffee machine on the 5th floor, as Rory O'Connor found out, actually is working. And Rory, you delivered with the coffee.
I did. We won't hold it against Cathal.
No, how are you, bud?
I'm not too bad, in yourselves?
Good. You're a Sligo Gaelic Games fan, and obviously last night was very, very unique in terms of the annals of the game, I suppose.
It was, yeah. I tuned into the stream. Great stream from the Dome last night in Bacon. Great game, actually, and it's very interesting to see how fast it is on the AstroTurf surface, and obviously no wind to contend with their heavy pitches. Cracking match, 121 to 117. Niall Murphy was outstanding. He scored 110. Lots of good positives for Sligo. I guess a lot of people are expecting a lot of Andy Moran's Leitrim this year, but he's only in there 6 or 8 weeks at this stage, so I would expect them to get a lot better, and I think the 2 sides have to meet again at the latter end of the Division 4 league campaign, which you'd hope at that stage they're both competing for promotion, but Division 4 looks really competitive now with Cavan and Tipperary in there. But yeah, I think both teams on an upward trajectory, you would hope. And for Sligo, I suppose, to get another game against Roscommon, a good calibre opposition against Roscommon on Saturday is great, looking ahead to the Division 4 league. So the inter-county season's up and running. It doesn't be long coming round, does it?
Just from the players' perspective, do you think it felt like a relatively normal game? Because I suppose one thing that struck me was that it was almost a bit like the Viva Stadium at times with the goalpost. It was hard enough to tell the goalpost from the back of the goal. But
they made that point. And they made the point about the football as well, that you could play with like a yellow football like they do in the Premier League in the winter time, because it's a white background. But I think that they have the colour behind the goalpost for the players is that little bit different, so they can see the goalpost essentially. But it's unique, and I guess for the players, someone was making the point yesterday that if you were a player yesterday and that game was on an outdoor pitch, and I think the weather was quite bad down in the west yesterday, but to travel to the game, it was a real boost to be heading in there in it's like nearly playing in Croke Park, it gives you a little bit of a boost to be playing in there, because it's so new and it's a novelty. And you have to give credit to Connacht J, because the facility is just unbelievable. And there's a great picture, I think it was Info Photography took it, James Crombie possibly, of the dome from a distance, taken in a field nearby with one of those West of Ireland stone walls. Cool. So it's a real contrast, and it looks like a spaceship in the middle of County Mayo.
I guess briefly, facilities are so crap in this country across all sports that this is like something from 2090. It's like, oh my God, we've something that's revolutionary. Like, we're a very wealthy country, but our sporting facilities are absolutely rubbish by and large. Across the League of Ireland, even across Gaelic Games, let's be honest. Rugby, we've Thomond Park, we've the Viva Stadium, but other than that, what else have we got this morning anyway?
We'll recap on the Premier League last night. Manchester United's unbeaten run under interim boss Ralph Rangnick came to an end. An 82nd minute goal from João Moutinho saw them lose 1-0 to Wolves at Old Trafford. That result means that United are 7th in the tables, 4 points off the top 4. Wolves just 1 place behind them in 8th. They've only lost twice in their last 8 games. Meanwhile, on the COVID-19 front, there's been a decrease in the number of positive results in the Premier League for the first time in 8 weeks. 94 cases were recorded in the latest round of screening, and that's 9 fewer than the previous 7 days. The darts came to an end last night. Peter Wright is celebrating a second PDC World Darts Championship title. The 2020 champion overcame Michael Smith in last night's final to win by 7-5. Wright won 9 of the last 10 legs to seal the title at the Alexandra Palace. As mentioned in Gaelic Games, Sligo through to the semi-final stage of the FBD League. They beat Leitrim by 121 to 117 last night at the Connacht J Indoor Dome. They'll play Roscommon at the same venue on Saturday. Galway set to meet Mayo on the other side of the draw on Friday. And here's the reaction of Andy Moran, the Leitrim football manager. He expects his sides to get better as time moves on.
Well, that's the important thing about playing matches, and you can kind of go away now and assess to see what worked, what didn't work, and then kind of just move it from there. How close are we? That's hard to tell. I think we'll know more now when we start off. We've a really tough opening to the league. We've Ulster champions from 2020 at start at home, which will be a bit of a derby here, and we have Tipperary as well. They're our first 2 games in the league, so they're two very tough league games. So we'll go away, we'll work, we'll get a few challenge matches, and we'll take it from there. But in terms of the progress the boys have made, the training they've done over the last 6 or 8 weeks, absolutely amazing, and they'll do nothing but improve from that, and that's what we're looking to do.
Dan McDonald, the all-seeing eye Rudd, has pointed out, of course, that Moutinho didn't join until they joined the Premier League, so I must be looking at Neves, that Preston game. So he just literally calls out all my mistakes, which have been plentiful.
Oh no, he's been telling me about them as well, and I've the stream of WhatsApps here from him.
Good, that's good. The Kingdom native Spillane looks primed to strengthen the Sligo's option. This is an interesting one. What would attract Pat Spillane Jr. to the Sligo setup, apart from the fact that his mother's from Sligo?
Yeah, well, I guess I don't think he's played underage football for Kerry, according to that piece in the Independent. So I guess it's a chance to taste inter-county football. He was flying it for St Jude's last year. I guess he's had a good age. He's 24 now, I think, as well. Huge boost for Sligo if this comes off. We heard the rumour over the weekend, all right. And for a county like Sligo to get a name such as Spillane involved in the inter-county setup is a huge, huge boost, I think. And I guess playing at that level in Dublin, and St Jude's got to the county final and lost narrowly last season. So to go from that to Division 4, I guess, isn't as big a jump as it might be for him if he was going into the Kerry panel or something like that. So for Sligo, it's great. For Pat Spillane Jr., it's great as well, I think, to get a taste of inter-county football, and a boost for Sligo at this stage. He's a big guy, physical guy, which you need in Division 4 as well. So all positive, I think, from our point of view anyway, and a novelty again to have a Spillane involved with Sligo. Who thought we'd ever say that?
Any other novel sports news for us this morning on, what are we, the 3rd of January?
4th of January this morning.
4th.
Yes.
The fourth already?
Yeah, it's the fourth, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Flying through the year.
In cricket, some cricket news this morning. Henrich Mallon has been appointed as the new head coach of the Ireland men's cricket team. The South African is set to succeed Graham Ford and will take up his role in March on a 3-year contract subject to work permit approval. Mallon played first-class cricket in South Africa before taking on coaching roles in his native country and New Zealand. He's currently the head coach of the Auckland Aces, while the fourth Ashes test gets underway in Australia tonight. England can't win the series. They trail the host by 3-0, and it hasn't gone well for them at all in this Ashes series, and their preparations have been hit further by COVID-19 for the upcoming test. Head coach Chris Silverwood and a number of his backroom staff are isolating and unavailable for the match, which takes place in Sydney. So that's the morning sports stories on this Tuesday.
What are your sporting hopes for 2022?
Oh dear. I think a reinvigorated football championship and Gaelic games, if possible at all. Last year was good in the sense that it came good at the end with Dublin and Mayo, and with Tyrone and Kerry, and Tyrone winning was obviously a great storyline. But you'd love to see, just wonder if the counties in that second tier bracket, if you like, away from the top 3 or 4, might take inspiration from Tyrone, who weren't picked out to be All-Ireland winners at the start, but they came good to do it, and it probably gives the likes of Galway, Johnny, Monaghan, Armagh, those sort of teams a little bit of a boost that Tyrone got over the line. League of Ireland season, I'm really looking forward to that.
Of course, you've had your little stint of commentaries as well.
Yeah. It'd be nice to get back to a few games this year. I think the League of Ireland season, like, I'm really interested to see what Derry City do. With the squad that they've gathered has been just, their recruitment in the off-season has been outstanding. Whether it all comes together, but they've got a really good manager. Obviously got Damien Duff as well. Shamrock Rovers look really strong again. Bowes, Rory, they'll be thereabouts.
You're almost in a slumber there, because Bows have been in something of a slumber since that European run. I mean, it's all gone Pete on, really.
I'm slightly encouraged by the last week of news of kind of the signings just before and after Christmas. Certainly feel encouraged by. I think it's going to be really, like, it's a bit like it's just going to be really competitive. There's about 6 really good teams there. There's one outstanding team, and then there's potentially Derry bridging the gap. I think Pats will come back to the pack. But no, feeling a bit more optimistic than I like. I mean, it was about a month of depression after the cup final, and I'm starting to come out of that now.
Yeah. Do you know what was one of the highlights for me during the pandemic? Was obviously, there was a myriad of things where you got to know your locality more. You found out things in your local area. LOI TV, right? So Graham Gartland was doing the co-coms from the Stamford Bridge game Sunday. He was a revelation that came through the LOI TV, the basically commentaries that clubs put together. We only had Rory O'Connor emerging as this, like, really, really passionate, albeit like fairly impartial, commentator, and Daily Mount with a very, 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 very energetic sidekick Scully beside you. We also had Cathal Mullaney doing a bit from the showgrounds, and this was actually one of the things I really enjoyed, hearing new voices and new people taking the media by storm, really, Colin.
Yeah, and I think it's set to continue, isn't it, this season? And
it's slightly up in the air, I believe, but if it does, you may have a situation where you can effectively watch any League of Ireland game for a nominal fee, which I think is a great thing.
And the Women's National League as well, and the First Division, which is going to be really competitive. I think it's brilliant because not only does it give people abroad as well, but in terms of engaging the audience and, say, younger people on social media, where you get your goals up quickly on social media after, because the quality of the goals this last season were class. Like, there was some really, really good goals. And I suppose a wider audience sees that when they're up quickly, maybe on a Friday night when there's not a whole lot else happening. For people to watch that on social media is a big thing, I think.
Briefly, Johnny Kenny might be making the move. Well, it looks like it will happen.
I think it's going to happen. Look, I think everybody knew that this day was going to come. Maybe not this soon, but you just have to wish him well. He's been outstanding for Sligo Rovers. He's been a revelation last season, and can only wish him well. I guess he's pretty young still to be moving across the border, isn't he, at 18 years of age? But look, there's no doubt about his football ability, so can only wish him well, and let's hope that he pushes on there and gets, if he could get game time, I mean, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, and I think that was the great thing about that's the great thing about the League of Ireland. If we look at positives, he was catapulted into the Sligo Rovers team, and his improvement since the first sort of 5 games that he played, from what I've seen, has been exponential. Oh yeah, no, he was a bet noir for Bows. Anytime I saw him, he was really, really excellent, and you could see it. Like, you could see he's got the tools to go and make it. And if it is Celtic that he goes to, whatever about complaining about players going to mid-ranking Scottish teams, like, you can see this guy kicking on and really making a really good career for himself. Very young to do it, though. You wonder whether another year or two here, or even that kind of bridging club, might be the better way to go, because it's very hard to get into a first team like that. But he's got the tools. Certainly, he seems to have the attitude as well. They seem to really like him down there.
Definitely. So we wish him luck.
I hope all your hopes and dreams come true in 2022. Yeah, one of the rising stars of this League of Ireland's kind of coterie of commentators. I'm telling you, it was really entertaining listening to. I mean, Joey Undoe actually called before you go. You were on with Joey?
I was just.
I mean, this is one of the most colourful experiences in sport. Not to mind League of Ireland.
He's just unbelievable.
Wow, wow.
But the passion he brings to it, but he's very, very intelligent about the game, obviously, too, which you would appreciate. And he really added to it, too. And that's another part of LOI TV, as you mentioned, the different voices and the different experiences that we get from the different commentators. And Joey certainly fulfilled that. And he's still a cult hero in the League of Ireland, and especially in Sligo.
Absolutely.
Still playing a bit, I think, as well.
I'd love him in a five-side. I mean, if I ever get playing again, Rud, we've soldiered together a little bit.
Yeah, he'd run the show, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he would. Just give Joey the ball.
Yeah, absolutely.
Carl, thanks a million for coming in.
Thank you.
The lack of coffees has been noted. Rud, it's 8:30 and we've only it's nearly 10 to 9. We've only had one coffee.
Yeah, we're doing okay. We're flying on fumes. We're doing a lot of League of Ireland chat for January, so it's good going.
It's good going. Ronan O'Gara is on the line now. He didn't have the best of starts to the year, Ronan. But as we say, I thought it was the 3rd of January. It's actually the 4th. It's a long, long way to go.
In the season, is it? Or
in the year itself and the season.
Yeah, well, you're stating the obvious. Yeah.
Happy New Year, Raj.
Happy New Year, boys. Yeah.
What happened against Cask?
That's a good question. Yeah, we're still working it out. That's the top 14. We're 24-3 up, playing the best rugby we've played all season. And you just give teams a glimmer of hope and a little bit of probably mentally switching off. We probably won the game twice and then had a chance to win it at the end. And unfortunately, Ohio West missed a kick a goal, but the game should have been dead and buried. They hadn't been beaten, I think, for a long time at home. So it would have been a good scalp. But the effort was there. Accuracy was there, definitely. We just gave up 2 soft set piece tries. So disappointing in that regard, but a lot of positives really in our play. But we need to play for 80. When we play for 80, we'll be very interesting.
Roger, it was pretty obvious watching highlights that Ohio West was pretty key to what you were doing in terms of that attack and creativity and all that sort of stuff. And I know you're coach now rather than just a former out half, but does it make it easier or harder that you've been in his shoes for those clutch kicks at the end and to either talk him through it or to understand what he's gone through?
Yeah, I definitely understand it, so it makes it pretty easy. I think it's definitely probably an area of his game, and he knows that especially after last season, that he had to work on. But it doesn't all just come together on the first time, so he has to keep practicing, keep knocking on the door. He kicked very well off the tee in the game, but pressure is different. But that's the last probably piece of the jigsaw for him mentally, because he's a really, really, really good rugby player. And I think he's a good goal kicker. He just needs to understand what kicking under pressure looks like. And when whatever it was, a full house in Cass, and they're all booing and going mental at the decision to give away a last minute penalty. At this stage, it was a little bit too much, but I'm pretty confident the next time he gets that shot, he'd be able to put it all together to convert and execute the kick.
Do you personally take a role in? Obviously, you're his head or you're his DOR, and you're picking him in the team and all that sort of stuff. But given your own experiences in it, do you take extra time with the out halves at all, or do you treat them in any way differently?
Yeah, you would, of course, because it's not. You're dealing with a human with a lot of emotions, and it's not a robotic process. And I think it's a learning experience, but I think the most important thing now is how you react. He's got to get back to work straight away, and he's got to get back kicking, because repetitions are important, but also it's very hard to replicate that pressure. You could look at numerous examples in the game of rugby where, I think, a lot of the games we've been watching, that real pressure doesn't strike that often for kickers. It might be once a season, it may not happen in a season, but you can be sure that it will come at some stage in your career. And for Higher West in the 2 finals last year. His goal kicking wasn't up to where he wanted to be or where I would have wanted to be, but that's okay, I think, because you win and lose together, and it's not the fault of the kicker. We could have been out of sight and it would never have come down to it. But I think it's a very interesting subject for me, I suppose, being an ex-kicker, understanding the psychology of what goes on in it and the work involved in it, and probably what's necessary to overcome this situation to turn a negative into a positive.
What throws you as a kicker?
There are so many things, I think, but a lot of people, underestimate. It is a different, I think pressure is different because, you have your routine for kicking, but like you're aware that it's all in this moment. That's a great feeling, but I think it's hard for young players to appreciate that because, I can remember early in my career, I didn't want to kind of a close game at the end because it was going to come down to me kicking it, and then 10, 12 years later, you're begging for this opportunity to have a go at the posts, but that comes with experience, and that's what experience is. And the question was it what gets to a kicker, is it?
Yeah, what would throw you?
Yeah, what would throw you? I think that's such an interesting question because there's so many, I suppose, subplots to that, and the fact that you could turn that into a positive too, and go look at the opportunity I have. Where am I on the pitch? What throws you? Just or like how lucky I am to have this opportunity. Come on, I want this penalty. Give it to me, please. I'll do anything to have this shot. There's different, I suppose, mindsets of how you frame that question, but what throws you is always, it was interesting. I remember for a period at Munster and with Ireland, it was kind of self-talk is very important, I think, as a kicker. So I think I went through stages of I knew that I kind of had it all worked out in my head to a point where I may miss if I dipped. So I used to say to myself, don't dip. So what do you do when you say don't dip? You dip.
Yeah.
And you miss. So how you kind of structure your language internally in your head is very important. So you mean don't dip. Another way of saying don't dip is stay tall. So if your brain is thinking stay tall, you usually have the levers where you can follow through and you can finish your kick well and you can get through the ball. But it was interesting. I didn't know that kind of. So I didn't want to dip, but you mean the minute you said don't dip, the brain will dip. So it's about, I suppose, working with people that are, I suppose, strong in that area in terms of mastery of the language, in terms of sports psychology. But the art of kicking is very simple yet complicated. So you just have to kind of nearly work out what kicker you are, and I suppose what your kind of, I suppose, 3 key points are in addressing the ball. Because if you try and clutter the brain, you're going to go back to that paralysis by analysis,
OTB AM is brought to you live by Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved racers. And we will talk about Coiga Moon. And Coiga was the Irish name for province because there used to be 5 provinces, including Meath. Ronan O'Gara has effectively in the Examiner broken down rugby squads into thirds. This is really, really interesting. In any professional entity, there are essentially 3 groups. The core group who believes in the project, a second group which doesn't always play or feel involved but ultimately sail or sink the vessel, and the third cohort, invariably disaffected by lack of game time or relationship with the manager, are disruptive and do everything they can to influence the middle tier in a negative way. Their glass is half empty on the way to empty. The key is to pull the middle group towards the doers and away from the moaners. You need that group, otherwise it's an uphill. Do the La Rochelle lads read the Examiner?
They do, yeah, everyone does, yeah. It's interesting, the world is tiny now, everything gets up.
What do they make of that?
But it's reality, I think it's in every business enterprise in the world. It's in OTB, it's everywhere, I think. That's why recruitment is so important, and that's why it's good too that you might let a bad one slip in somewhere, but usually people have a measure on someone and they have their card marked, and I think that's very important. Even when you think people aren't watching, there's always people watching, and that makes it fascinating. But it's the reality, you know. I think the most important thing being a manager is that you don't want to be liked, but you want to be respected, and I think that's your message to players, because what we do with sport is really enjoyable, but for some people it can't be enjoyable if they're not playing, and as a coach you appreciate that as well, but you're trying to give them game time, you're trying to keep them involved. But if the reality is you can't be a liar either. You got to have 40 people there, or more emphasis on quality in the squad. But I think there was some brilliant things in the Crusaders, I suppose, mentality or environment, where there was a harmonious group, even though people didn't play. So I'm absolutely convinced, and I'm not open to debate about that can't be achieved. I think it can be achieved, and I strive every day that I'm whatever job I'm in, that I would be part of that you can have a really positive growth mindset group.
If you've been watching Man United, how many of the squad are in that bottom third at the moment?
A lot, yeah. I was thinking, because I saw the game against Wolves last night. I watched it for a bit because my son is a massive Ronaldo fan. And
why? He's the man. The man is anyway. We've gotten to Ronaldo. Sorry, go ahead. Best, one of the best players ever, obviously, if not the best. But like at the moment, Raj, anyway.
Yeah, well, exactly. But Father Time catches everyone too, you know, and he's done good. But it's always going to be, you know what I mean. It's very hard at that age to keep doing what he's doing, and you can see his probably big days are diminishing more and more. But yeah, the Man United thing. But I think it wouldn't be fair to probably compare, because I think the mindset of top footballers is very, very, or in that league, it's just very, very different to compare it to rugby, because I think it's just the one big thing is that rugby players probably, it may be changing with Dupont and fellas like that, but they'll have to work after rugby again, you know. While in soccer, it seems to be that they're going to be set up for life, and fair play to them.
Roger, we can talk about that again, and that's a sad reality of football. But anyway,
probably, yeah. Roger, there's another line in your column that I took note of, that you said, for those who will be elsewhere next season, there are 6 months of the campaign remaining where they have to retain professional integrity and standards. And here at home in your own province, you've two coaches who are moving on at the end of the season to different jobs. One's, you know, Van Gran is going to Bath, and Larkham is going to Brumbies, and there's loads of stuff going on in Munster. Like some of them haven't played for 9 weeks before the Connacht game and stuff. But how does that? I know, like, you've obviously committed yourself to La Rochelle. You wrote very well about your reasons for doing that, and for not you know, for taking the Munster courtesy call and saying thanks and but not right now. But how do you think that feeds into the dynamic of a club? It's really like in football, when you're gone, you're gone. You don't stay around for 6 months to finish the season. So how do you think that dynamic will play out, you know, with the coaches moving on and the players not knowing who's going to be coming in, who's doing their contracts, all of that sort of stuff that feeds into the running of a club, not just from week to week?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think I personally don't have experience about it, so I can't comment accurately on it, Rory. You know, I think that would be my key message. I haven't been in that situation, and as I said, that's in other scenarios you're able to comment very accurately on it because you've experienced it, or you tasted it, you felt it. But I don't know what is that like from. I'm sure I experienced that as a player, but like as players, we're very, very short mind focused and only kind of interested in how change affects you. But I can understand the bigger scenario when coaches are moving on. But I'm sure that what would be imperative for me would be the fact that you mean about finishing well, and Van Graham and Stephen Larkham will want to finish well. So these are very, very important months for them, because I think it is important also to think that you in professional sport you're always planning and there's recruitment, but it's the short term, it's the now that matters. So in their points, point of view, nothing will change in that regard. It's a short-term focus, and they're driven on by their next performance.
What about the job itself? Are you getting texts from coaches within the game who are wondering about it? Is it still as attractive a role? Because obviously the timing isn't right for you personally, but to us here, I mean, it seems strange that Van Graan is going to the bottom team in the Premiership. How attractive is this job right now going into the next season? How attractive is the URC to work in comparison to the two other competitions that you could be working in Europe or Japan or wherever?
I think it's a very, very attractive job. I think it's Munster, but I think that there's also realisation probably that the perception outside of Munster may have changed a bit. You mean 10, 15 years ago, Munster was the dominant club in Irish rugby, and had a lot of silverware. Leinster now are the best team in Ireland, and that would be recognised throughout the world. So from that point of view, I suppose Leinster are setting the standard, and that's the club that a lot of teams talk about, certainly in Europe and certainly in the Southern Hemisphere. I think there's a lot of, I suppose, other options to coach in Munster for world-class coaches, but at the same time, I am obviously biased, but Munster would still be a very, very attractive job to potential coaches.
There was a lot of rumours going around that Ultan Dillane is on his way to your neck of the woods. Is that, can you confirm, give us an exclusive, or is it still too early to do that?
No, there's a lot of shenanigans and
what's the French for
stories out there that Ultan Dillane is going to an overseas club in France, so that will be decided in the foreseeable future.
Fair enough. Just the EPCR or the Champions Cup picture, because obviously the round 2 was completely decimated. Last year we abandoned round 3 and 4 because there was back matches to play. You wrote in the Examiner that you confidently predicted that there's going to be more disruption with Omicron and everything that's going on. How confident are you that your game against Bath in 2 weeks will be able to go ahead, that 3 and 4 will take place, and that you won't be playing top 14 rugby? Like, can you even be confident at this stage? Is it just all about this weekend's game?
You can't be because, like, the game it's Saturday week, so the planning for that, we need to probably know on Sunday whether the game is going ahead, and I think a lot of people, because there's a lot involved with it, and it's getting more and more complicated. The travel, obviously, between England and France. So we're hopeful Bath can travel, but I think, are we confident? I don't think we can be confident at all in that regard, because obviously with the amount of positive cases exploding all over Europe, we played cast, and we're gone back to testing every day now. So, I think we've had 1 or 2 more cases from after the cast game. So it's a changing picture every 12 hours.
Cohesion has been the big thing in rugby over the last, a big word that keeps coming up. But how much has that shifted to adaptability now and being able to think on your feet and move with it? Because if you were trying to be cohesive and trying to plan ahead, this would all just wreck your head all the time.
Yeah, it is. It's probably it's been really beneficial, I think, in the fact that you have also the opportunity to keep your group alive, firing, involved, in the fact that you predict a team, but what's picked probably and maybe announced, you mean on a Thursday, is very different for the captain's run on a Friday. You could have numerous changes in it, and that obviously has knock-on effects to people that weren't in the playing group for the weekend, and bringing in guys that haven't been. So everyone kind of must feel involved and must feel that they have an opportunity of playing, and we're seeing more and more of that, because it's happening. You have a team selected, announced, and then you can have up to 6-7 changes in the starting team, and the same in the replacements group. So in that regard, being adaptive, and I suppose staying negative is absolutely key to giving yourself a chance of being involved.
Just finally and briefly, what's your take on Ireland's out-half situation going into the Six Nations?
Well, obviously, I think it's hard to comment. We saw a little rugby played. Well, obviously, Joey Carberry has done his elbow. Jack Carty has did very well against Leicester in the game I saw. That was live in Europe. And obviously Johnny is in Leinster, and just the two Burns are looking for game time there as well. In Ulster you have
Billy Burns.
Excuse me. For
so many options.
None of them playing.
What do you make of Carty?
Of Joey Carberry, is it?
What do you make of Jack Carty and his forms? You mentioned against Leicester, obviously.
I think he's shown that maturity that I think comes with. I'd say he had a good look at himself in terms of where he needed to get better. I think the leadership role has suited him. I think he needed that responsibility. There was probably, I don't know, it was a perception from my behalf maybe that he was playing with a bit of a free spirit mentality. I don't think that's suited too much to Test rugby anymore. I think what the other players on the pitch appreciate in their 10 is direction, authority, presence, control. But he also had an eye for a gap, and I think the way they play in Connacht, it suits, I think, the skill set of Jack Carty, and he's got a very good kicking game. So he's most definitely knocking on the door. I think, Joey Carberry is a class player. He's just bedevilled with injury. And I think Harry Byrne hasn't presented fit enough to put himself in that picture, while I think Ross Byrne is underappreciated.
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll get to that in another day. Thanks a million, Ronan.
Cheers, guys.
Let's look around.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to yourself. Here is what's up on OTB Sports Radio today. OTB Gold at 1 p.m. with Ronnie Delaney. 3 p.m. we've got the Dadcast. 4 p.m. career retrospective, Gene Gilroy, that's Ali's coach. 6 p.m. OTB Gold, Joe meets Gerlach Nan. And OTB is back live tonight at 7 p.m. Up next this morning on OTB AM. If you have some New Year's resolutions, Jessie Barr might give you a few more.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Football Pod with Paddy and Andy, our new weekly Gaelic football show with Paddy Andrews and Andy Moran.
I don't know, all these talks about kicking, you say lanes, but Mark Lane said I don't think you can kick the balls far with them late boots on too, to be honest. No, definitely Adidas Predator.
We used to have Eamon O'Hara in with us, with the club. O'Hara used to come with the nicest boots of all time, He used to, out of the attic, a box of Adidas boots coming in. And all the young fellas used to be like, where is he putting these boots on him? So when Cunningham goes in now, coaching his first club team, everyone will be like, where is he pulling out these new dance from?
Download the OTB Sports app and subscribe to the GAA podcast feed now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Yeah, and on OTB AM this morning, we are now delighted to be joined by Jessie Barr. Jessie is a performance sports psychologist, part of the specialist expert team for the Irish Life Health Runuary 2022 programme to support runners of all levels to run January and not let it run them. So runners can sign up free of charge at irishlifehealth.ie/Runuary, and they will receive a 4-week training plan which starts this week. There are options for beginners to the more experienced runners to help them reach a target of 5k, 5 miles or 10 miles to be completed on January 31st. Good morning, Jessie.
Morning, how are you?
Have you already been for your run this morning?
I haven't. I wouldn't look this fresh, I'll tell you. If I had already been for my run, I'd be that face. I said I'd wait until after I'd spoken to you guys. Yeah, so as part of this, we're looking at kind of different people throughout the next 4 days just to advise on, I guess, to better yourself in January and into the year. From your perspective, what's this all about? And obviously there's a good reasoning behind it. Yeah, so I suppose I joined the Runuary campaign last year, so I was delighted that they decided to bring it back again this year, because I suppose, look, this time last year when we started it off, we were all in a position that lockdown was still relatively new. We had gotten into exercise, but maybe some people had fallen off from it as the pandemic had went on. And I suppose the pandemic has been going on so long now that all the novelty of, working from home, exercising from home, all that kind of we're in this together has kind of worn off. So we kind of felt it was a really nice program to get people back exercising and feel like they're part of something. And I suppose the reason we started in January is because it's always the time of New Year, New Me, and people are setting New Year's resolutions. And look, I think if any of us have ever set a New Year's resolution before, we know they don't tend to be very successful for several reasons. So, one reason might be you have this big goal and no plan or no kind of idea of how you're actually going to achieve it. So with Runuary, we provide, if getting back into running or getting fitter is your goal, we've provided a training plan. So it's taking the thinking out of it, it's giving you a plan and you just go and follow it. And I suppose, it's removing one of those barriers. We have a lot of barriers to achieving those New Year's resolutions. And one of them is, I don't really know how I'm going to do it. Or you might go hell for leather in the first week and start to kind of lose motivation. So I suppose from our point of view, we're trying to help people to kind of set new habits, set new goals, not call them resolutions, maybe more like intentions, new intentions for the year. I'm going to intend to start introducing running back into my life. Because, the research says that people who did start running during the pandemic, those numbers have dropped, and we'd love to see people getting back involved again because it's just such an easy, accessible type of exercise.
What do you think are the main, you've touched on a few of them already, Jessie, but what are the kind of pitfalls for people who maybe have either fallen out of the habit or who are taking up for the first time and going out the front door and without maybe have a plan and just trying to do 5k without ever having done 5k before? What are the kind of things that you've seen people fall down on that they can try and avoid, that people can try to avoid in the next week or two?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing is lack of goal setting. Just going out with this overall goal, I'm going to start running, but not really thinking about the how. How am I actually going to achieve this? Where am I going to fit it into my life? What time? Do I know, how long I'm going to run for? Do I know, how to warm up properly? So, removing and not having those kind of hows, not having those plans can be really, really challenging because then you're just going for a run aimlessly. You just walk out your door and then you say, okay, I know there's a 5k loop near my house. I'll just do that. But, with this plan, we provide, build up of training. So it's, it's not just you go out and run 5k. You might be one day you do a certain amount this, maybe it might be intervals the next day. And I think that's one of the things is providing that plan that people don't really think about. They're not really thinking long term, how is this going to fit in? You're just thinking of January and then not really that long term. So I think goal setting and not thinking about the really specifics of how I'm going to actually achieve my goal. What are those little steps that I need to do to make sure this is actually more likely to happen? And then thinking about the barriers to that goal as well, I think is really important because if you've never ran before, if you're not really fit enough to run 5k and then you try to run 5k and it feels awful, is that going to be off altogether? So, or maybe you've been injured before, so you need to rehab an injury first. There could be different barriers or maybe it just gets darker earlier, so it's not really that appealing. So, what are the barriers that might be in the way of you achieving this goal and how can I overcome them? And sometimes those barriers can become a little bit of excuses. I know for me, if it's very cold, it's very easy to turn around and go back inside and wait till maybe a warmer day rather than just wearing warmer clothes and just kind of getting on with it. So yeah, I think goal setting and recognizing those barriers is really easy first step. It's something we can all do without, any real expertise. It's just sometimes thinking a little bit in more detail about what it is I actually want to achieve this month.
I think as well, Jessie, if it's cold, you can always say to yourself, well, I could run in this, or I could run in 40-degree heat in Qatar or something like that, and this actually isn't that bad. Psychologically running, I ran a small bit when I was younger, and I was saying to Rod earlier on the show, got into cycling last year. The psychological stuff that goes through your head on this passage when you actually are running, could you explain that to people? You're obviously an ex-Olympian in 2012, but for somebody who's going to take up this 4-week program and gradually he or she gets into the 5k, the freshness of the air, be it in a rural thing or an urban setting, for me it can be fascinating psychologically.
Yeah, look, I suppose it's one of the few times that we have very few distractions. Like you probably, you might go for a run and you listen to maybe a podcast or you listen to music, but that internal dialogue, that self-talk that's going on can get quite loud when you're running, because suddenly you're quite in tune to all this kind of internal feedback that you might not be paying attention to when you're working and you have distractions of TV and people. And when you're out on your own running, you really are listening to yourself and what that self-talk sounds like. And I think it's a time we realize how negative it can be. You know, if you're hurting, you're much more aware of that. You're thinking, oh my God, my lungs are burning. Oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to keep going. I'm only at 3K. How am I going to get to 5K? And it can be kind of a battle sometimes to get through it. And it can be really tough. And I'm not going to lie and say it's really easy and it's really easy to overcome. But knowing that it's really normal, those negative thoughts are quite normal. They're not anything other than a thought. And you can just entertain it and say, yeah, you know, my legs are meant to be burning. My lungs are going to be hurting because I haven't put them through this stress in a long time. So kind of rationalizing the thoughts rather than kind of going with them and let them be the reason you stop, you know, because it doesn't feel that comfortable to run most of the time. I was a runner for a long time, and most of my sessions I felt really uncomfortable, and I was having that internal battle in my head. And it was, you know, reminding myself of why I'm doing it. Why am I putting myself through this hurt? What is my end goal? What is my why? What's the motivation behind this? Because otherwise it's very easy to give into those negative thoughts and think, you know what, I've done 3K, I'm hurting too much, I'm just going to walk home.
Yeah.
What was the reason I actually set out to do this 5K loop today? You know, what's my reasoning, and are these thoughts really going to be enough to let me stop today?
And Rod, January 1st is a great way to assess things, and like, I guess, like, people will go to the gym and they'll realise that there is a kind of a no pain, no gain element to life, that actually you do feel great afterwards.
Yeah, but I think Jessie's right. I think the mistake people make, and I mean, a couple of years ago my mate was getting married and he wanted to get into running, and I run a bit, and he said, I'll go out with you one day, and he gave up after 2K because he hadn't run he played football and he'd given up, and he just, you know, he wasn't able to do it.
Did he get married?
He got married, yeah, and the wedding went ahead, but his running career, I don't think he ever went out again.
He didn't last.
Like, I'm not fast, you know, he just didn't. What he should have done was the couch 5K or Runuary, and he should have started with kind of, you know, walk a minute, run a minute, built himself up to that point. But instead, he tried to do 5K.
That's a key point, Jessie, isn't it? Like, every day, you be ambitious, but be like realistic with your goals as well.
That's it. Look, we've probably all heard of that idea of SMART goal setting, and one of them, like the A, is making your goal achievable or attainable. You know, if you go out, you've never ran 5K without stopping before. If you say, I'm going to go out and run 5K now, or if you've never run at all, why would you set yourself 5K? That's actually quite long. So why not? I'm going to go out and run for 10 minutes, or I'm going to run for a minute, like you said, maybe a minute of running, jogging, a minute of walking, and making it more realistic, you know, because if your goals are so, you know, if you're setting your goals so high that you're never actually going to achieve it, your motivation's just going to be worn away. Whereas if you set it that little bit lower, that you have to work for it and say, okay, I want to be able to run a 5K, you know, but I'm going to allow myself to stop during it, but I'm going to make myself run the 5K in one go. That could be a bit more realistic than saying I want to run a sub 20-minute 5K, for example, if you've never ran before. So yeah, being realistic in what your goals are. From, you know, Runuary, like the program offers, you know, programs for beginners and for people who are looking to set personal bests for 5K, 5 mile and 10 mile. If you've never ran before, maybe don't go for the 10 mile, you know, maybe go for the 5K and sign up to that beginner program. Or maybe sign up to the 5 mile if you want to challenge yourself. But again, that beginner program, because January's not that long. It is only a month at the end of the day. So, you know, maybe you want to be looking more long-term what that goal is, and not saying, okay, by the end of the month, I'm going to be able to run a really fast 5K. Maybe your goal can be, I just want to be able to run a 5K and only stop a handful of times. That's a more realistic goal.
How do you feel about stuff like Strava? Like, I mean, you've obviously come from a performance background where you probably monitored every time you ever did up until a certain point, and then when you're running for fun, I'm sure you probably still have an element of that.
You better not be talking Strava down here, by the way.
I'm not going to. No, like, I mean, Johnny Ward is one of the most impressive Strava accounts I follow. Some people love, like, I love it. I love coming back from a run or a cycle and looking at what I've just done and stuff like that. But then some people might find it quite pressurised. You look at other people you follow and they're doing amazing things. Like, how seriously should people take that side of things? Because, I mean, a lot of people would have got watches for Christmas, and everyone has a phone. You can track everything you do, but, you know, you should be doing this for fun as well.
Yeah, and I suppose, look, I think there's nothing wrong with all those, you know, fitness wearables and things like Strava. I use Strava myself, but for me, having come from the background that I do, I don't post. I use Strava to, especially for when I'm doing new routes, to see how long it took me and to see what my speed was. But when I post it, I switched the option to just have it for me only.
Okay.
Because I was, I didn't realize when I signed up to Strava, I actually first signed up to it last year when I started Runuary, and I didn't realize that when you posted things, other people could just start randomly following you the same way on social media. I thought it was just an app for me. And, I was getting these kudos and likes and thumbs up after.
Sorry, Jessie, the whole point is to show other people how great you are. That is the whole point of Strava.
Not when you're as unfit as I was at the time.
I know the feeling.
I was doing it just, I might turn it on when I was going for a walk with the dog just to see how long that route was, if I was kind of doing a bit of a record.
Jessie's very slow today.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking, oh my God, are people giving me kudos for going for a walk? So I discovered the option to just have it for only me, because at the end of the day, this running is only for me. If your goal is to kind of, if you're being competitive with it, or you have a kind of a group of friends, and it's kind of, sometimes it can be motivating to see, okay, well, they've already done theirs today. Great, I'm going to go out and do that. I'm going to make sure I do it. Or maybe you see what other routes that people have used. If you're okay with that, that's great. But for me, I didn't want the pressure of other people seeing, oh God, she's running for 5K, because, obviously I used to be a runner. So for me, I'm doing it for me at the moment. But it depends again what the purpose of you doing it is. And as for the fitness wearables, I think tracking your progress is really important, because if you're seeing progress, it's obviously going to give you confidence. It's going to increase your motivation, but don't rely on them too heavily either. Sometimes it's important to see how you're feeling, rather than kind of, I know people have things like Whoop and that Way ring. I'm not even sure how to pronounce it, but sometimes people can kind of, wake up and see, okay, I'm not that recovered, so today is not going to be a good day running wise. And actually just maybe going by reading your body's signals, how do you actually feel, could be important too. Now, I'm old school. I'm wearing a gold watch. I don't wear fitness wearables, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask about these, but I think tracking is really important for the purpose of, seeing if you're actually progressing towards a goal, and if you're not, changing maybe the approach that you're using. But if you're finding it's actually just adding pressure, or not making you feel good, then maybe using that at a different stage, or using it in a different way, I think it's important too.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Rory, because a lot of cyclists say, your cycle didn't happen unless you put it up on Strava, and because I never knew one from the other, psychologically there is an element of that, and I've some really embarrassing stories about certain Strava segments. You go out on an exceptionally windy day and you hope you might hit a PB because it's 60 kilometers an hour, you're going to get blown off the bike. But a lot of this is, as you say, Jesse, if you strip all that away, it's about mental health and physical health and your own personal well-being as well. Forget about what people are looking at.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I suppose the purpose of Runuary is not competitive. So signing up to Runuary, but then you're putting up all these amazing times on Strava. Okay, it can be competitive. You can make anything competitive. Obviously, I always tend to do that. But I suppose Runuary is more to encourage people to just get back into running and rediscover running. So if you're quite a competitive person, or someone who's a very experienced runner, and that's kind of what you use it for, that's brilliant. Go. I suppose it's what the reason that you've come to set this goal or join this program is. And like I said, for me, it's just to recreate the habit of running, which I fall out of pretty quickly because I'm not as fit as I used to be, and that can put me off pretty quickly.
Actually, on that, sorry, yeah, because I follow some elite athletes on or ex-elite athletes on Strava. How difficult is it when you were elite athlete, and obviously as you get older then you're not quite able to do what you were so the balance of maintaining that love whilst at the same time acknowledging your mortality or aging process, I guess.
Yeah, look, that was a big transition when I retired, was recognizing that my body is going to change. My body doesn't look the way it did when I was an athlete. It doesn't respond the way it did when I was an athlete. It can't do what I used to do and then I have to remind myself, I'm not training 10 times a week either. So I can't expect that. I have to be realistic. But that was a really big transition. And I suppose that's why I actually fell out of running for so long. It was easier to do other types of exercise because I didn't have that direct comparison to my former identity as an athlete. So now I'm far enough away from being an athlete that I can accept that, yeah, I'm not fit now, but I've also chosen that, and my life looks very different now. But initially I probably didn't run for, I'd say, a good year and a half. I didn't go run after I retired because it was a really hard transition out to kind of recognise those changes that are happening.
Yeah, and just later on in the week, tomorrow we'll have nutrition with Daniel Davey. He's the nutritionist for Leinster, Dublin, GA, etc. And then Thursday, Robbie Cannon, Shane Lowry's S&C coach, and how to get moving. I've said this a million times as well, Jessie. There are so many things we are really good at, we would love to do, we just haven't done them yet.
That's it. You know, I think it's our beliefs is what holds us back more than anything. Like, I actually started doing some boxing classes now. No one's punching me back. I'm only punching a bag. But like, it was something as an athlete, people still laugh at me if I should, like even my friends or I showed my family my boxing gloves that I bought, and they think it looks like, you know, those foam fingers that you get at a concert, because my arms are so skinny. And I would have always been I wouldn't have been very aggressive. It would have been probably a flaw that I would have had when I was an athlete. I didn't have enough aggression, and upper body would have been an issue. So the idea for them of me doing something like that is absolutely comical. And it probably would have held me back for a long time. But I went and tried it, and I was like, you know what? Who cares if I'm not that good at it? I really enjoy it. And I think, you know, we do have these beliefs that like, oh, I'm, you know, this kind of limiting beliefs that I've always been a runner, so that's the kind of exercise I should always follow. But I suppose I'm not really trying to be an athlete anymore. I'm doing things to keep fit. I'm doing things, like you said, to look after my mental health and well-being. Does it matter that good at it anymore? Not really, you know? And I think it's what that belief is, you know, what's the belief that's holding you back and where does that come from? And often it is just something we just, you know, if you actually challenge it, you probably have a really good reason for why that belief is kind of holding you back.
Jessie, just the one thing I fall down on the most is trying to, I kind of say I'll go for a run this morning, and then I kick it to the afternoon, and then it's the evening, and then it doesn't happen, and it's gone. Yeah. How do you kind of, what tricks do you use to kind of carve out that little window for what you want to do on a daily basis, and what kind of, again, like, what are the things that people need to look out for to make sure that they don't kind of let it slide but you know, and just not do it in the end?
I do the exact same thing. So I'm not great at practicing what I preach, but I think first thing is, you know, setting a plan in place before the day. So if you just say, I'm going to go for a run tomorrow, but there's no real plan about it, it can be very easy to keep putting it off. But if you say tomorrow at, you know, 8:30, I'm going to go for my run, and you have everything laid out, ready to go, that's a start, you know, that you're a bit more specific about what your plan is going to be. Make yourself accountable by telling somebody else, or maybe planning to meet someone. I've actually set up a WhatsApp group that, you know, I've revived a WhatsApp group that I had with my friends, who a few of them have signed up to Runuary with me. So telling them, you know, even just sending a text being like, oh, I'll be going for a run after work today. So then they'll check in, see how it went, because or they have a picture of them after their run. So that accountability, you know, no one likes to be asked, oh, how did your run go? And you go, oh, I just didn't go, you know, and there's no reason for it. So that accountability can be really good as well. So kind of setting that plan as accountability to yourself, but then having that external accountability can be good if you do know you have a tendency to keep procrastinating. I'm the queen of procrastination, so I need things like that to keep me in check. And then I suppose, you know, removing any other barriers. So knowing where the run is going to be. So knowing exactly what route you're going to take, checking what the weather's going to be like so you can have the right gear ready. You know, removing any potential barriers that could become excuses as to why now is not a good time. I'm going to go later. Oh, didn't go today. Sure, I'll go tomorrow. The weather looks better. You know, and sometimes it's okay to put things off. If you don't feel good, it's, you know, it's not about forcing yourself either. But if you are constantly just pushing and just procrastinating, you know, that's different to listening to your body and saying, I'm not ready to do this run today. I'm quite sore. I'm quite tired. So yeah, I think those are kind of a few little tips that I would have your gear laid out. So it's literally looking at you when you get, if you're doing it first.
Winking at you.
Not going looking first. Yeah, exactly. Waving at you as you walk past it to go to the kitchen.
Yeah, procrastination can obviously ruin the nation. Jessie, thanks a million for that.
Hi, Jessie.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for having me.
Happy New Year to Jessie. And anyone can sign up for Runuary free of charge at irishlifehealth.ie /Runuary and get their 4-week training plan. We have to thank Jessie. We have to thank Cathal for coming in. Like,
got the coffees,
people may not have noticed, but Cathal went presumably up to the 5th floor to get the coffees.
Yeah, big moment for them. Huge contribution to the morning. Got to share that last half an hour. I might go for a run now.
Yeah, genuinely, if you're listening to Jessie there are so many things that, don't put it off. Just give it a go, give it a week. In this case, give it 4 weeks if you can, and check out the website, because you might go into February feeling far better than you did going into January. We hope that you feel better than you did at 7:30 this morning when the show started, Rory. That was the first Off the Ball AM of the year.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks
Ross Tierney tomorrow.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Tuning in.
Absolute top prospect. Thanks to Rudd. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Join us tomorrow morning from 7:30 AM. Nathan Murphy will be with us. We'll be talking football. Ross Tierney, Daniel Davey with us as well, and there'll be much more too. Right now on OTB AM, we're bringing you part 1 of OTB AM's Crystal Ball, predicting the sporting events of 2022. Happy New Year to you.
A good big one is always better than a good little one.
Yo, I'm a big man. Yo, I'm a big man.
I would still think size is very important.
Yo, I'm a big man.
Oh yeah, big lad. Big man, yeah.
Yo, I'm a big man.
Huge lad.
Yo,
they were huge. Massive chest, massive shoulders. He was a specimen.
They were an exceptional group of little ones.
Yeah. A good big one is always better than a good little one.
Big man.
Chris Martin.